Welcome to Shredder Fanfic. Like, subscribe, and hype video. Join members to gain early access to new videos.
The MC is reborn as a dragon from Game of Thrones. He is reborn inside of Monster, inside of Skull Island. He on Skull Island creates a dragon clan. Will he help Kong, or will he help Godzilla? Will he move his clan to the Hollow Earth?
Monster, what if I was reborn as Drogon in Skull Island? Chapter 1, The Awakening of Drogon. The room was thick with smoke. The crackling flames roared, their orange tongues licking the walls of the small apartment. It had been a quiet evening at first, just a man sitting back in his chair, a cold drink in hand, and a sense of anticipation as he watched the latest movie he'd been dying to see, Godzilla x Kong, The New Empire. It had all the action he'd craved, a battle between two of the most colossal creatures ever imagined. But as the movie played out on his TV screen, an unexpected disaster had struck. It started with the flicker of a light, then the unmistakable smell of something burning. He glanced around his dimly lit apartment, realizing with a growing sense of panic that flames were already creeping along the edges of his curtains. His heart raced as he rushed to his feet, his mind scrambling to figure out what to do. There was no time to escape, no time to make it out. The fire was too quick, too powerful. The room was too small, the smoke too thick, the heat unbearable. As the flames closed in around him, he dropped to the floor, covering his mouth with the sleeve of his shirt, but it was too late. The heat became unbearable, his body no longer responding as his limbs felt heavy and weak. The last thing he saw, before the world faded away, was the glowing screen of the TV, still showing the epic battle between Godzilla and Kong, a battle he would never finish watching. When Shredder opened his eyes again, he felt different. Gone were the familiar walls of his apartment, the harsh heat of the fire, and the cold chill of panic that had filled him moments before. Instead, the air was cool, damp, and filled with the earthy scent of fresh soil. His eyes fluttered open, and he gasped, startled by the strange surroundings. The ground beneath him was not the smooth, polished floor of his apartment, but wet, uneven dirt. What was going on? Where was he? Panic gripped him again, but it was different this time. His body felt wrong. He tried to push himself up, but his movements were sluggish and disoriented. His arms were no longer the strong, muscular limbs of the man he once was. They were small, too small. He looked down, only to find that he was no longer human. What in the world? His body was covered in dark, shiny scales, and his hands now clawed were not hands at all. He had paws. He struggled to push himself upright, but as he attempted to move, he felt a strange, unfamiliar weight on his back. His body swayed awkwardly, and he could feel something, wings? His eyes darted upward, scanning the environment around him. He was surrounded by dense trees and massive rocks, the air thick with the smell of the jungle. There was a constant rustling in the bushes, and distant, thunderous roars echoed across the landscape. The real horror set in when he realized where he was. This wasn't New York. This wasn't even Earth as he knew it. The towering trees, the bizarre plant life, and the overwhelming presence of strange creatures made it clear, he wasn't in his old world anymore. A creeping realization crawled into his mind. He wasn't in a fire. He wasn't watching a movie. He was somewhere else entirely. Slowly, shakily, he forced himself to stand, his small, dragon-like legs wobbling beneath him. His body small, yet powerful, seemed to hum with a strange energy, the muscles under his scales flexing in response to his newfound form. But still, the reality of his situation remained as distant and impossible as the thought of returning to his old life. A soft growl escaped his throat, deep and instinctual. He froze. What was that sound? What was he? He lifted his head, his eyes wide and filled with confusion. The air was alive with noise, and the world around him seemed so vast, so much bigger than he ever remembered. His surroundings were so alien, and yet, there was something familiar about the strange feeling he now had. It was then that he saw it. A massive, lumbering creature appeared from behind a cluster of bushes, a hulking, prehistoric-looking thing. Its head was low, its body covered in thick, scaled armor, and its eyes gleamed with a predatory intelligence. It was a scrawl crawler, one of the many terrifying creatures that roamed the untamed wilderness of Skull Island. The sight of it sent a chill down his spine. He didn't recognize it, but his instincts screamed that this was no ordinary beast. Before he could react, the scrawl crawler's massive head whipped around, its eyes locking onto him. It let out a terrifying, guttural growl and took a step forward. Instinct kicked in, and he quickly backed away. His heart raced as his tiny dragon-like legs scrambled to move. He had to get away. He had to survive. As he struggled to escape, the creature's growls grew louder, more threatening. But just as he felt his body begin to give in to panic, something unexpected happened. A strange, resonant sound echoed from far away, a roar unlike anything he had ever heard. It was deafening, the kind of roar that made the ground shake beneath his feet. He froze, his heart pounding. The scrawl crawler seemed to sense it too. Its head jerked toward the sound, momentarily distracted. In that brief moment of chaos, he turned and fled. His legs, though small and untrained, moved faster than he expected. As his body darted through the dense jungle, he began to piece together the fragments of his strange new reality. This place, this Skull Island, was a land of monsters. The giant beasts from the movie he had been watching were real, and now, somehow, he was a part of it. But what had happened to him? How had he ended up here, in the body of something so foreign? He wasn't human anymore. The thought gnawed at him. It was impossible. Yet, here he was, a dragon or something that resembled one, fighting to survive in a world where survival meant more than just outsmarting enemies. It meant outlasting the very monsters that ruled this island. The realization finally hit him with a sickening clarity. He was no longer a man. He was a creature, a beast among beasts. And in this new world, he had to find a way to survive. As the night fell and the jungle grew even darker, Shredder, or whatever he was now, stumbled through the underbrush, his mind reeling from the change. He wasn't sure what his next move should be. Should he seek out the towering monsters like Godzilla and Kong that he had once seen on the screen? Was there a way to regain his humanity, or was this his new reality? All he knew was that there was no turning back. He was in Skull Island, now, and it would be a long time before he learned the rules of this strange, monstrous world. Chapter 2, The Struggle for Survival. The sun barely filtered through the dense canopy above, casting the jungle in a dim, greenish hue. My scales still felt slick with morning dew, and I couldn't ignore the gnawing emptiness in my stomach and the unbearable dryness in my throat. I had made it through the night barely, but now, I was faced with a new challenge: survival. The physical toll of the previous day was beginning to catch up with me. My small, dragon-like body felt weak, and I could barely summon the strength to move. I needed water. I needed it badly. The jungle was alive around me, buzzing with insects and distant roars that made my heart race. I pushed forward, dragging my limbs through the thick underbrush, each step feeling more sluggish than the last. The air was thick with humidity, making it even harder to breathe. The hunger and thirst gnawed at me, and I could feel my body weakening with each passing moment. Through the thick foliage, I spotted a glimmer of clear water, a stream running peacefully through the dense jungle. My heart skipped. Water. Finally. I stumbled forward, moving with what little speed I could muster. My tiny, dragon legs wobbled beneath me, but I forced myself on, focusing only on the promise of cool relief. Every instinct told me to reach the water before I collapsed. I had to make it. When I finally reached the stream, my legs gave out from exhaustion, and I dropped to my belly, crawling closer to the edge of the water. I could see my reflection for the first time. A strange, unfamiliar creature stared back at me. My body was small and sleek, covered in dark, shimmering scales. My head, large for my body, was topped with small, sharp horns, and my wings folded tightly against my sides looked clumsy and fragile. But none of that mattered. I didn't recognize the creature in the water, but I didn't have time to question it. I was dying of thirst. 1. I dipped my head low to the water, drawing in deep, desperate breaths. The coolness of the stream brushed against my lips, and without hesitation, I took a long, shaky drink. It tasted sweeter than anything I had ever known. For a moment, I allowed myself to lose focus, my throat finally feeling the relief it so desperately craved. The cold water rushed down, washing away the dryness that had been clawing at me. But just as quickly as my brief moment of peace came, it was shattered. A disturbance in the water. The surface rippled, and I froze, my heart suddenly pounding in my chest. I didn't know what it was, but the very air seemed to change thicker, heavier. The sense of dread that crept down my spine made my instincts flare, and I jerked my head up, scanning the surroundings in a panic. I barely had time to react. From the water, something massive shot upward, its scale-covered body slithering out of the stream with terrifying speed. A large, serpentine creature, its body long and undulating, emerged from the depths like a living nightmare. Its yellow eyes locked onto me with a predatory gleam, and its maw opened wide, revealing rows of jagged teeth. I barely had a moment to process what was happening. A low growl escaped me, too weak to be a proper warning, and before I could move, the creature lunged. Instinct kicked in. Fight or flight? I chose flight. My legs pushed off the ground, but my tiny, untrained body felt clumsy and slow. I scrambled backward, my claws digging into the soft earth as I tried to retreat. The creature, a massive serpent-like predator, was faster, though. It slithered after me, its jaws snapping dangerously close, the scent of death filling the air. Its body was a blur of motion, its muscles rippling with terrifying power. I had to move faster. Panic surged through me, and I pushed myself to my feet, stumbling, struggling, but somehow, I managed to break into a full run. I felt clumsy, vulnerable, and completely out of my element. But something deep within me, some primal instinct, told me to survive. I could hear the creature's slithering grow louder, feel the ground tremble beneath its weight as it closed the distance between us. My wings, small and weak, fluttered uselessly against the air, as though mocking me for not being able to fly. There was no time to figure out how to control them. I could barely control my own legs. My body was still too unfamiliar, too weak to move with any kind of real agility. I could feel the creature's breath now, hot and heavy on my tail. The fear in my chest threatened to suffocate me. But I couldn't afford to stop. Every breath felt like an eternity. I pushed my limbs faster, ignoring the burning in my muscles, ignoring the way my body screamed for rest. The creature was right behind me, and if I didn't outrun it, I would be just another meal in this merciless world. I didn't know how I had ended up here, how I had gone from a man with a life, to this tiny, vulnerable dragon, but one thing was clear: this was a world where only the strong survived. I had to survive. I pushed forward with everything I had left. The underbrush whipped against me as I fled, the sound of the creature's pursuit growing louder. Then, with a sudden burst of adrenaline, I leaped to the side, diving into a cluster of thick foliage to hide. I held my breath, praying that the predator would pass by. I heard it slither past, its massive body brushing the leaves, the air thick with its scent. I remained perfectly still, my heart hammering in my chest. I dared not make a sound. If it heard me, I was done for. My body was still trembling with fear, my limbs aching from the desperate sprint. But I was alive. For now. After what felt like an eternity, the creature finally moved on, its heavy slithering slowly fading into the distance. I waited, not daring to move until the sound of it was gone completely. When I finally allowed myself to breathe again, I realized just how close I had come to dying. This world was nothing like the one I had known. It was primal, untamed, and unforgiving. I had been so sure of my strength before, but now, it seemed like the universe itself had decided to teach me just how small and weak I truly was. But I had survived. And that, at least for now, had to be enough. As I lay in the bushes, my breath finally slowing, I couldn't help but reflect on what had happened. Yesterday, I had been a person with a life, a world I understood. Now, I was something else. A creature struggling to stay alive in a world where monsters ruled. I was no longer who I had been. The world had changed, and so had I. The question now was, what kind of creature would I become? Would I survive this world? Or would it consume me, like it had so many others before me? One thing was certain, I was in for a long, painful journey ahead. Chapter 3, The First Steps of Survival. The jungle was still. The distant growls and roars had faded, and the thick canopy above me let in only a sliver of light. My body felt heavy with exhaustion, my legs trembling after the frantic escape. I had made it out of the serpent's reach, but I wasn't safe. Not yet. Every breath felt like a victory, each beat of my heart a reminder that I had made it through another challenge. But even as I lay hidden in the underbrush, my mind raced with thoughts of what was to come. I couldn't stay here forever. I needed food. I needed water. But most of all, I needed strength. I couldn't afford to be weak, not in this world. I had no idea what had happened to me. 1 minute, I had been watching a movie, sitting comfortably in my apartment, and the next, I was in the body of a small, weak dragon. A creature among beasts, struggling to survive in a jungle full of horrors. The world had changed so quickly, so brutally. It felt like a nightmare, a cruel twist of fate. But this was real. I stared up at the trees above me, my eyes locked on the rough bark of a nearby trunk. The branches swayed gently in the wind, the leaves rustling softly. I could hear the faint sound of something moving in the distance. A predator? A prey? I wasn't sure. What I was sure of was that I couldn't just hide. I couldn't just stay crouched here, waiting for the world to swallow me whole. No, I had to move. I had to adapt. I gathered what little strength I had left and slowly pushed myself to my feet. My body felt awkward, unfamiliar, like I was still learning how to control it. My claws scraped against the ground, and my tail swished behind me, swaying like an anchor in the wind. But I wasn't going to let fear paralyze me. I glanced up at the tree above me and felt a small spark of resolve. It was time to climb. The other creatures in this jungle could easily overpower me on the ground. But if I could get high enough, if I could get to safety for a while, I might have a chance. The idea of climbing a tree seemed both absurd and necessary. I had never considered myself particularly agile. But with nowhere else to turn, I set my gaze on the sturdy trunk before me. I crouched low and tested my legs, my small, dragon-like body trembling with the effort. It wasn't graceful, not by any means. But I managed to push off the ground, using my claws to grip the rough bark of the tree. It took several attempts, each one feeling like a struggle, but I eventually made my way up the trunk. My claws scraped against the bark as I pulled myself higher, the muscles in my legs burning with the effort. It wasn't easy. I wasn't built for climbing like this, not yet. But every moment I spent climbing was a moment I wasn't wasting, a moment I was gaining back control. When I finally reached the first set of branches, I paused, panting from the exertion. My legs ached, and my claws dug into the wood for stability. The jungle stretched out below me, a maze of green and shadows. I looked down, my heart skipping a beat as I realized how far I had climbed. The ground seemed distant, almost unreachable. But in this moment, it felt safer up here, out of reach from the larger predators that roamed below. As I rested, my mind turned back to the most immediate problem I faced: food. I needed to eat. The idea of hunting something bigger than me was laughable. I wasn't strong enough to fight a creature on the ground, not yet, anyway. But hunger gnawed at my stomach, and the thought of going without food for much longer made my body ache. I had to be practical. I looked around at the branches overhead. There were insects crawling along the leaves, some of them buzzing lazily between branches, others crawling along the bark of the tree. Small creatures, insignificant to the mighty beasts that ruled this world, but to me, they were all I had. I swallowed hard. I had never eaten insects before. The thought of it disgusted me. But in the back of my mind, a voice echoed, reminding me that I had no choice. This was survival. I couldn't afford to wait for something better to come along. I wasn't in my old world anymore. This wasn't a world where I could simply go to the store and grab a meal. This was a world where survival was the only thing that mattered. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what I had to do. The insects were small, no more than an inch or two in length, but they would be enough. I could feel my body yearning for sustenance, and I knew I had to overcome the disgust. I had to do whatever it took. I reached out with one clawed hand, carefully grabbing one of the insects off the tree branch. It wiggled in my grasp, and I held it there, my throat tightening in hesitation. For a moment, I wondered if I could just wait longer, if I could hold out for something else. But the hunger in my gut refused to let me wait. I had no time for hesitation. I swallowed hard and threw the insect into my mouth, forcing myself to chew. It tasted bitter, and its texture was unpleasant, but it gave me the energy I needed. As I chewed, I focused on the feeling of my body accepting the food, the way my stomach began to settle, even if my mind revolted. The taste didn't matter. What mattered was that I was feeding myself. I was surviving. I grabbed another insect and ate it, then another, and another, each one more difficult than the last, but each one bringing me closer to the strength I would need. I could feel my mind, once clouded with panic, beginning to clear. The hunger pangs slowly faded, replaced by a dull sense of relief. It wasn't a great meal, it wasn't a meal I would ever choose willingly, but it was enough. Survival. That was the goal. And right now, eating insects was the key to my survival. I looked down at the jungle below, my gaze sweeping across the dense undergrowth. A low growl rumbled in the distance. My heart skipped, but I didn't move. I had learned my first lesson: in this world, every decision had consequences. The creatures here didn't care if you were hungry, scared, or weak. They only cared about whether you could survive. I had made it this far. But the real test had only just begun. I took another deep breath and settled into the crook of the tree, staring out over the jungle. I had to adapt, learn, and survive. If I wanted to make it in this world, I needed to become something stronger. Something better. And for the first time since waking up in this new form, I felt like I might just have a chance. Chapter 4, The Awakening. The dawn broke quietly over the jungle, the pale light cutting through the heavy canopy in soft, filtered beams. I had spent the night high up in the trees, nestled in the safety of branches, away from predators and dangers that lurked below. But as the morning air filled my lungs, I knew that I couldn't stay hidden for long. My body was weak. The thirst, the hunger, it all gnawed at me like a constant reminder that I wasn't in control. The world outside felt alien, dangerous, and unforgiving. But it was the world I had to survive in now. I climbed down from the tree slowly, my limbs stiff with soreness, each step a reminder of how fragile I still was. My wings fluttered nervously against my back, small and useless. They weren't a source of power or defense yet. But the more I moved, the more I realized that I had to push past the weakness. This was not the time to be cautious. It was the time to adapt, or be consumed. I made my way back to the stream, the same one I had nearly died at the day before. The rippling water beckoned, and I could feel my body desperate for its cool touch. The ground felt damp beneath my claws, and as I neared the stream, I could already taste the coolness in the air. I dropped to my belly, careful not to let my guard down. My reflection caught my eye as I leaned in to drink. For a moment, I didn't recognize myself. I stared at the creature in the water, confusion and shock seizing me. The creature looking back was small, much smaller than I had imagined. Its scales shimmered a dark shade, and the shape of its body, though dragon-like, was still underdeveloped. A horned head, large for its body, stared back at me with wide, confused eyes. And the shape of my wings, folded tightly against my back, looked clumsy and weak. But it was the face that shocked me most, the eyes, the sleek, smooth shape of my snout. It was as if I had been reborn as a small, pitiful version of something familiar. I looked like a baby Drogon. A baby Drogon. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. The shock of it hit me all at once, and I stumbled backward in horror, my claws slipping against the muddy bank as I scrambled away from the water. I hadn't come here to confront some ridiculous, twisted reality. I had come here to drink, to survive, and now all I could do was stare at myself, a small, pathetic creature that reminded me of something from a show I had watched in another life. How had this happened? Why did I look like this? It didn't matter. I didn't have time to dwell on it. My heart raced in my chest, and I quickly turned my back on the reflection, running away from the water, as fast as my tiny legs could carry me. I didn't know what was out there, what might be waiting, but I knew that the longer I stayed near the water, the greater the risk of something finding me. I hadn't learned to fly, hadn't learned how to defend myself. And whatever else this jungle had in store for me, I was too weak to face it head on. I wasn't going to be eaten because I had spent too much time staring at my reflection. I didn't know why this world felt so familiar yet so wrong, but that didn't matter now. I had to survive. And in order to do that, I needed strength. The hunger gnawed at my insides, but it wasn't just physical hunger, it was a hunger for survival. The desperation in my gut was almost as sharp as the fear that drove me away from the stream. But there was another realization that followed close behind. I wasn't just eating for the sake of eating anymore. I was eating because I had learned something important. The insects. They made me stronger. At first, I had eaten them out of necessity, driven by hunger and survival instinct. But now I knew that each time I forced myself to consume one of those small, wriggling creatures, my body reacted. I could feel it, my muscles, though still weak, seemed to twitch and grow. My scales, though small, began to shimmer a little brighter, and a faint pulse of energy surged through my veins. It wasn't much, but it was enough to make me realize, the more I ate, the stronger I became. It was a simple, harsh truth. And it made me feel something I hadn't felt since arriving in this new form, hope. I wasn't helpless. I could get stronger, one insect at a time. I moved through the dense underbrush, searching for the small creatures that had made my survival possible. As I passed by trees and overgrowth, I saw several insects crawling along the bark, their tiny legs twitching as they moved. The instinct to eat them was automatic now. My body recognized the need, and my mind didn't hesitate. I reached up with one of my small claws, snatching an insect from the branch. It squirmed briefly, but I crushed it in my mouth without hesitation. The taste was still unpleasant, but my body didn't care. The moment I swallowed it, I could feel the faintest surge of strength course through me. Another insect. Then another. And as I ate, I forced myself to reflect on the bigger picture. I wasn't eating because I was starving. No, I was eating because I knew I needed to get stronger. This world was full of dangers, more dangerous than anything I could have ever imagined. But I wasn't powerless. Not if I could keep growing. Every bite, every insect consumed, was one step closer to becoming something more. Something capable of surviving. I stayed in the dense jungle, moving from tree to tree, snatching up bugs whenever I could find them. The thought of stopping didn't cross my mind. I couldn't afford to stop. Not when I knew that every bite would bring me closer to strength. I didn't know how long I would have to live like this. I didn't know if I would ever truly be free of the fear, the hunger, the weakness. But I knew one thing, this world wouldn't wait for me to catch up. It wouldn't let me live just because I wanted to. I had to fight for it. And so, I ate. I ate until my body no longer trembled from weakness, until my legs felt a little more sturdy, and my wings, though still useless, felt a little lighter. Maybe one day, I would be able to stand up to the predators lurking in the shadows. Maybe one day, I would learn how to use the strength growing inside me. But for now, I would survive. I would eat. And I would grow stronger. Because that was the only way out of this jungle alive. Chapter 5, The Spark of Hope. A week had passed since I had found myself thrust into this strange, monstrous world, and with each passing day, the realization of my situation settled deeper in my bones. The jungle was no less unforgiving than it had been the first day I stumbled into it, but now, I had a routine, a rhythm that kept me alive. I woke each morning in the trees, alone, cold, but alive. The warmth of the sun streaming through the leaves provided a false sense of comfort, but I didn't dare relax too much. The jungle was alive with dangers, and I had learned the hard way not to trust its peaceful facade. I descended from my little home in the trees, my claws digging into the bark as I crept down to the stream below. The water still felt like a lifeline. Every time I drank, it was as if I was cleansing myself both of the physical exhaustion and the haunting thoughts that plagued my mind. I crouched low to the water, eyeing the surface warily. It had become a pattern. I would drink, I would reflect, and then I would run. I didn't know what was out there, what monster would appear next, or which predator might be lurking just beyond my reach. But I did know this: if I lingered too long, if I allowed myself to relax, something bigger than me would find me and finish what I had narrowly escaped before. So, after taking my fill of water, I didn't hesitate. I bolted away from the stream, heart hammering in my chest, my tiny wings fluttering behind me in a desperate attempt to keep my balance. The sounds of the jungle seemed to grow louder as I sprinted, the distant growl of something massive echoing through the trees. It wasn't long before I had found my next meal. The bugs had become my lifeline, my ticket to survival. No longer did I eat them out of necessity alone. I had learned that each one I consumed gave me a little more strength. The insects, the tiny creatures, might seem insignificant in a world full of towering beasts and terrifying monsters, but they were the one thing I could rely on. As I crept through the foliage, I spotted them: bugs, crawling along the branches, scuttling under leaves, moving in the cracks of the bark. I wasted no time. I snapped at them with quick, practiced movements, swallowing each one whole without even tasting it. There was no room for hesitation, no space for guilt. I ate and ate, not because I was starving, but because I knew that the more I ate, the stronger I became. By now, it had become second nature. I didn't think about it. I simply did it. It was the only way to survive. When I had eaten enough, I made my way back to my little home in the trees. I wasn't full, not really. But I felt stronger than I had the day before. My muscles were no longer trembling with weakness, and my body, though still small, felt more solid. But there was something more, something I couldn't ignore. I had started to feel it inside me: the energy, the power, something bubbling just beneath the surface. It was faint, like a spark waiting to be ignited, but I knew it was there. Fire. I had been a dragon once, a creature of flame and fury. It was only natural that I would still carry that potential within me. The first few days, I had tried to conjure fire, but nothing had happened. I hadn't been sure what I expected. I wasn't even sure how to access it. But now, as I sat nestled in the safety of my little nook among the branches, I could feel it stirring almost like a memory. A deep part of me, buried under layers of fear and confusion, began to remember what it felt like to breathe fire. I inhaled deeply, gathering all the strength I could muster. I focused, pulling the energy from deep within, from that ancient, primal part of me. I opened my mouth wide, hoping for a stream of flame to emerge. I felt something shift inside of me, a small crackling sensation, but it wasn't fire. It wasn't heat. A spark. It was small, so small it barely flickered at the back of my throat, but it was there. A tiny ember, like a flicker of hope in the vast, dark jungle. I tried again, more determined this time. The spark flickered again, and for a moment, I thought it might be a fluke. But then, a stronger pulse of energy surged through me, and another tiny spark shot out from my mouth, barely lighting up the air. It wasn't fire, not by a long shot, but it was something. I had done it. A small, weak spark, but it was a spark nonetheless. I wasn't sure if it meant I was getting closer to the fire I had once known, or if I had only unlocked a fraction of what was buried deep within me. But it was progress. I grinned to myself, if only for a second. The spark of fire was a sign. I had been weak, but I was growing stronger. The more I ate, the more I felt the potential coursing through me. I wasn't sure how long it would take for the flames to come, if they would come, but now I knew that I had a path forward. I didn't need to be a perfect dragon overnight. I just needed to keep surviving, keep feeding, keep growing. And one day, when I was ready, the flames would return. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath, feeling the warmth of the tiny spark still flickering in my chest. This was only the beginning. Chapter 6, The First Flight. The sun had barely risen when I made my way back to the stream. Another day. Another battle for survival. It was strange to think that this routine drinking, running, eating had become my new normal. I no longer questioned how I ended up here or why I was this small, weak creature. I simply was. And that was enough to keep me alive. As I crouched low to the stream, the water sparkling under the first rays of sunlight, I couldn't help but feel a strange sense of calm. The jungle was still a dangerous place, yes, but I had begun to understand it, at least in part. I knew where to avoid, where to hide, and where I could find food. But today was different. Today, something unexpected caught my eye. A fish. It was small, no more than a foot long, darting playfully just beneath the surface of the water. I froze, my eyes narrowing as I watched it swim in circles, oblivious to my presence. My stomach growled loudly, louder than usual, and for the first time since I had arrived in this jungle, I felt the gnawing urge to catch something bigger than an insect. The instinct was undeniable. I wasn't sure how to catch it. I wasn't built for fishing. But my instincts kicked in. My claws twitched, my tail swayed behind me, and without thinking, I lunged. It wasn't graceful, nothing about this whole situation felt graceful, but the fish was so small and my movements so quick that I managed to catch it in my claws, its slippery body wriggling in my grasp. I held it tight, its scales glinting in the sunlight as I pulled it from the water. I felt a strange thrill in the hunt, a rush of satisfaction that made my heart beat faster. The creature was mine. But my moment of victory was short-lived. A sudden shift in the water sent a ripple through the stream, and before I could react, a shadow loomed beneath the surface. My heart skipped a beat, and I turned just in time to see a much larger fish. No, not a fish, something far worse. It was a massive, aquatic predator, its jaws wide, gaping open as it shot toward me with terrifying speed. I panicked. The creature lunged, and I barely had time to react before it snapped its jaws around me. I yelped in fear, feeling the cold, slick pressure of its mouth closing around me, pulling me toward its waiting teeth. But then something unexpected happened. My wings twitched. They fluttered, a soft, weak movement, and for a fleeting moment, I felt the power in them. The energy coursed through my small body, and with a desperate, instinctive thrust, I flapped my wings harder. To my utter surprise, I was lifted from the water. My small, fragile wings barely capable of supporting me actually worked. For a brief moment, I was airborne. I flapped harder, pushing against the water's surface as the predator's jaws snapped shut beneath me. My wings beat with desperation, and I soared just a few feet above the water, feeling the wind rush beneath me. It wasn't much, barely a few seconds of flight, but it was enough. I had flown. The predator, disoriented and confused, continued to swim in circles below, its eyes tracking me with hunger, but it was too late. I had managed to break free, and I wasn't about to let it get another chance. I flapped my wings again, my body still trembling from the shock of what had just happened. The few seconds of flight had drained me, and I was no longer sure I could keep going. But I pushed myself. I darted away from the water, my claws digging into the ground as I ran, my wings fluttering weakly behind me for balance. I didn't stop to look back, I just ran, faster than I had ever moved in this form, until I was deep into the safety of the jungle once more, away from the water and its dangers. My heart pounded in my chest, adrenaline coursing through my veins as I staggered to a halt in the underbrush. I was safe. For now. I glanced down at the fish still clutched in my claws. It was a small victory, but it was a victory nonetheless. With shaking claws, I tore into the fish, tearing off chunks and swallowing them whole. The meat was tender, much more satisfying than the insects I had been eating, and I savored each bite. The hunger inside me slowly began to fade, replaced by a small, contented feeling. But as I sat there, gnawing on the fish, I couldn't help but reflect on what had just happened. The flight. The fire. I had done it. For the first time, my wings had actually carried me, even if it was just for a few seconds. I had felt the wind beneath me, the thrill of rising above the ground. And more importantly, I had survived. I had escaped. I wasn't helpless anymore. The spark of fire inside me was still weak, but I could feel it. Each time I ate, each time I grew stronger, it came a little closer. I could feel the fire stirring deep inside me, and I knew that soon, it would roar to life. I wasn't a full dragon yet. Not by a long shot. But I was getting closer. The thought of that massive fish that had nearly swallowed me reminded me of how far I still had to go. There were creatures in this world that I wasn't ready to face, ones that could tear me apart in an instant. Godzilla, Kong, and the other titans were a long way off, and I had no delusions that I could challenge them right now. But one day I would be ready. I had already started to change. I could feel it with every passing day. The more I ate, the more I grew. The more I faced, the stronger I became. And one day, when I was powerful enough, I would stand against the giants of this world. I would challenge them, and I would fight for my place in it. But for now, I took another bite of the fish, savoring its taste, and focused on what I had accomplished. I had flown. I had survived. And in time, I would be ready for whatever this world threw at me. Because I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was growing. And maybe, just maybe, I could fight beside the likes of Godzilla and Kong one day. Chapter 7, The Feast of Beasts. The jungle was starting to feel familiar. Not safe, never safe, but familiar. Each morning, I woke up a little stronger, a little faster. My wings could carry me for a few precious seconds, and my sparks of fire were becoming more frequent. I wasn't helpless anymore. I was still small, still weak compared to the monsters that roamed this island, but I was learning. And I was hungry. The bugs weren't enough anymore. Even the fish I caught yesterday had only satisfied me for a short time. My body demanded more, stronger food, richer meat. That's when I saw it. A squirrel-like creature, not too different from the ones I had seen in my past life, but bigger, more alien. Its fur was matted with dirt, its ears twitched at every sound, and its long, bushy tail flicked behind it. It was fast, cautious. It had survived in this jungle for a reason. But so had I. I crept low, keeping my body pressed close to the ground as I stalked forward. My claws dug into the earth, every muscle tensed, waiting for the perfect moment. The squirrel twitched its nose, sniffing the air, oblivious to my presence. Then I lunged. It was fast, but I was faster. My claws snagged its tail, and before it could bolt, my jaws clamped down on its neck. It thrashed, kicking wildly, but I held on. 1 bite. 2. Then it went limp. I stood there, panting, staring down at my kill. My first real hunt. The fish had been luck. This was skill. A rush of satisfaction filled me, but before I could savor it, something else hit me, something stronger than hunger. A smell. Thick, rich, and overwhelming. Blood. I turned my head and saw it in the distance, movement through the trees. Carefully, I climbed a low-hanging branch to get a better view, peering through the thick jungle canopy. And then I saw it. A skull crawler. The sight of it sent a deep, primal terror through my entire body. I had never seen one in person before, but I had heard them. The way the ground trembled when they moved. The distant howls that echoed through the trees at night. And now, one was right there, ripping into the carcass of a Skull Island deer. Its long, pale body coiled as it tore flesh from the dead creature, its massive mouth stretching wide to swallow chunks of meat whole. Its snake-like form twisted, the exposed ribs along its torso flexing as it feasted. I didn't dare move. I barely breathed. If it saw me, I was dead. No amount of flying or fire sparking would save me from that thing. So I waited. The skull crawler fed for what felt like an eternity, stripping the deer of most of its meat. Blood soaked the jungle floor, the scent so thick in the air it made my mouth water despite my fear. Then, as suddenly as it had come, it left. The beast slithered back into the trees, vanishing into the jungle, leaving behind only the scraps of its kill. I stayed frozen for a long moment, watching, listening, waiting to make sure it was really gone. Then my hunger took over. I scrambled down from my branch and sprinted toward the remains. The deer's carcass was mostly torn apart, but there was still meat left. I didn't hesitate. I tore into it, ripping chunks of flesh with my teeth, swallowing as fast as I could. It was the best thing I had ever tasted. Rich, warm, real. I ate as much as my small body could handle, stuffing myself until my belly ached. Then I ran. Not back home, not yet. I darted into the underbrush and hid, watching the carcass, waiting to see if anything else would come. Because for the first time, I had learned something valuable. The jungle wasn't just a place of fear. It was a place of opportunity. Chapter 8, Strength in Hunger. I crouched low in the underbrush, my belly full, my body tense. The jungle had gone quiet, but I knew it wouldn't stay that way for long. The scent of blood was too strong, too tempting. Something else would come soon. And sure enough, I heard them before I saw them. A rustling in the trees. Soft, deliberate footsteps. Low growls in the distance. Then, movement. A pack of small predators, maybe the size of wolves, slinked through the foliage, their eyes locked onto the remains of the deer carcass. They sniffed the air, their sharp teeth bared as they approached the kill. I held my breath. Then came something bigger. A massive, boar-like creature with thick, matted fur and curved tusks emerged from the opposite side of the clearing. It grunted, pawing at the ground, its small eyes locked on the deer. The smaller predators hesitated. A silent standoff. Then, chaos. The pack lunged. The boar charged. Snarls and screeches filled the air as the animals tore into each other, fighting for what little meat remained. I didn't wait to see who won. I turned and ran. My claws dug into the earth as I sprinted through the jungle, weaving through trees, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't stop until I was deep into the forest, far from the kill site, far from the blood-soaked clearing. Only when I was certain I was alone did I slow down. And that's when I noticed it. I felt different. Stronger. Faster. Lighter. The meat had done something to me, something I hadn't expected. My muscles didn't ache like they used to. My movements felt more fluid, more controlled. And my wings. I flapped them experimentally. There was power there. More than before. I took a deep breath, crouched low, and leaped into the air. For a moment, I panicked, expecting to fall. But I didn't. I soared. Not high, not far but farther than before. My wings carried me for a solid 5 seconds before I had to land, my claws scraping against the bark of a tree. I grinned. This was real. I was growing. Changing. Becoming something more. I wasn't just some weak, helpless creature struggling to survive anymore. I was becoming a true dragon. And one day, I would be strong enough to fight alongside or against the titans of this world. One day, I would no longer have to run. Chapter 9, The Hunter's Instinct. Hunger was no longer just a need, it was a tool. I could feel it in my bones, in my muscles, in my wings. Every bite of food, every scrap of meat, every struggling prey I sank my teeth into made me stronger. And I was beginning to enjoy it. Not just eating but hunting. It wasn't about survival anymore. It was about control. Each morning, I woke with a purpose. My body still wasn't strong enough to challenge the giants of this world, but I was no longer the weak, starving hatchling I had been. My wings could carry me farther. My fire, though still weak, sparked more frequently. My claws were sharper, my reflexes quicker. And so I hunted. At first, I stuck to the small creatures, squirrels, rodents, oversized insects. Anything that I could catch with minimal effort. Then, I got bolder. I started stalking larger prey, small lizards, scavengers picking at old carcasses. They were faster, more cautious. They had survived in this jungle for a reason. But so had I. One morning, I found a nest of strange, reptilian creatures half the size of me, with long tails and sharp little claws. They reminded me of tiny dinosaurs, their beady eyes constantly scanning the trees for danger. They didn't see me until it was too late. I dropped from a low branch, landing on one before it could react. My claws sunk into its soft belly, my teeth snapping down on its neck. The others scattered, screeching in terror, but I didn't care. I had my kill. I tore into the meat, relishing the taste. It was different from the fish, the deer scraps. Richer. More powerful. And I felt the difference almost immediately. My body tingled, heat rushing through me like a slow-burning fire. When I spread my wings, they felt stronger. When I flexed my claws, they felt sharper. I ate until nothing was left but bones, then wiped my snout against my forearm, breathing deeply. I could feel it. I was growing. I still wasn't ready for the true monsters of this island, not yet. But every meal brought me one step closer. One day, I wouldn't just be hunting these small creatures. One day, I would be hunting them all. Chapter 10, Fire and Flesh. The jungle had its own rhythm, its own cruel, unspoken rules. Eat or be eaten. Hunt or be hunted. And today, I was the hunter. The river was quiet when I arrived. The water shimmered under the early morning sun, peaceful on the surface, but I knew better. Beneath that calm, predators lurked, waiting for something weak and stupid to wander too close. I was no longer weak. And I was far from stupid. My stomach growled, a sharp reminder of why I was here. The scraps of small prey were no longer enough, I needed more. Bigger kills. Stronger food. Then, I saw it. A fish. No, a beast. Twice the size of the one I caught before, its thick, armored scales glinting as it moved beneath the surface. It glided through the water, silent, deadly. A challenge. I waited, crouching low by the river's edge, every muscle tense. The moment it drifted close, I struck. My claws tore through the water, latching onto the creature's slippery body. It thrashed, powerful and violent, but I held on, my wings flaring to keep my balance. It was strong. But I was stronger. With a fierce yank, I hauled it from the water, my teeth sinking into its neck. The taste of blood filled my mouth, but before I could celebrate my victory, the river exploded. Something massive shot upward from the depths, a gaping maw lined with jagged teeth. Another predator. A bigger one. It came for me. I barely had time to react before it lunged, jaws stretching wide, ready to swallow me whole. Instinct took over. My chest burned, heat surging through my throat, and before I even realized what I was doing, I let go. A burst of fire erupted from my mouth, small, weak compared to what I knew a real dragon could unleash, but enough. The flames shot straight down the creature's open throat. It let out a gurgled screech, thrashing wildly as smoke poured from its mouth. The scent of scorched flesh filled the air, and for a split second, I saw its massive body convulse. Then it sank, disappearing beneath the surface, leaving only bubbles and the stench of burnt meat behind. I hovered in the air, my wings beating furiously, my chest still tingling from the fire. I did it. I breathed fire. 1. I couldn't stop the grin from spreading across my face, but there was no time to dwell on it. I had my prize. The fish's body was still clutched in my claws, its weight dragging me toward the water. Gritting my teeth, I flapped harder, carrying it toward the shore. It was heavy, but I refused to let it go. With a final push, I landed on the riverbank, dropping my catch onto the muddy ground. My body ached, my wings burned, but I didn't care. I won. Without hesitation, I tore into the fish, ripping chunks of flesh, savoring every bite. It was rich, powerful. I could feel it making me stronger. But before I could finish, a sound cut through the jungle. A deep, guttural growl. I froze. Something was coming. Something big. I didn't wait to see what it was. Abandoning the half-eaten fish, I turned and ran. Because no matter how strong I was getting, I wasn't the king of this island. Not yet. Chapter 11, Feast and Flight. The jungle was never quiet for long. By now, I had learned the pattern: death always brought life. Whenever something big died, smaller creatures would come crawling out of the shadows, desperate for their share. Scavengers, hunters, opportunists. Just like me. That's why, when I smelled blood thick in the air, I followed it without hesitation. Through the trees, past broken branches and torn up earth, I crept forward, my heart pounding with anticipation. Then I saw it. A skull crawler. It stood over the fresh corpse of some large beast, its long, pale body coiling as it tore into the flesh with its oversized maw. Blood dripped from its teeth, pooling beneath its massive frame. I pressed myself low to the ground, barely breathing. I had seen one before, but only from a distance. Now, watching it feast just a few tail lengths away, I felt my instincts screaming at me to run. But I stayed. because I knew what would happen next. The skull crawler ate greedily, ripping through the carcass with violent efficiency. It didn't leave much, but that was the way of this island. Eat fast, or someone else will. Then, just as suddenly as it arrived, it slithered away, vanishing into the trees. I waited. Listened. When I was sure it was gone, I ran forward and devoured what was left. The meat was still warm, fresh, thick with the energy of whatever beast had fallen here. I ate as much as I could, my claws tearing through the scraps, my jaws crunching through sinew and fat. Strength filled me, raw and powerful. Then I heard them. Footsteps. Snarls. Growls. Other scavengers, drawn by the same scent. I spun around just as they emerged from the jungle, two reptilian creatures, their yellow eyes locked onto the carcass, their sharp teeth bared. Not as big as the skull crawler, not as dangerous, but still threats. They wanted this food. And I wasn't ready to give it up. One lunged at me. I dodged, snapping my jaws at its face. My claws raked across its snout, drawing blood. It screeched and fell back, but the second one charged in, trying to catch me off guard. This time, I didn't dodge. I met it head-on, clamping my teeth onto its throat. It thrashed, its claws tearing at my side, but I didn't let go. With a powerful twist, I slammed it into the ground. It was still alive, but dazed. That was all I needed. I grabbed the lizard in my claws, half my size but still a worthy prize, and launched into the air. And this time, I didn't fall. The strength in my wings was different now. No longer weak, no longer fleeting. The sky was mine. For the first time, I wasn't just gliding, wasn't just flapping for a few seconds before crashing back down. I was flying. Minutes passed, and I was still in the air. 10 minutes. The jungle below grew smaller, the trees stretching out like an endless green sea. I had done it. I was no longer bound to the ground, no longer a creature that had to run from danger. I was becoming something else. Something greater. Something unstoppable. Chapter 12, Chapter 12, still small, but no longer helpless. I landed on a high branch overlooking the river, the lizard still twitching weakly in my claws. Its blood dripped down, staining the bark beneath me, steam rising where it touched the warm surface of my scales. Without wasting a second, I dug in. The flesh was tough, muscle-bound, filled with sinew and tension, but it was rich. I didn't eat because I was starving anymore. I ate because I needed to grow. Every bite was fuel. Every drop of blood, every tendon I tore through, every bone I cracked open, it was all part of the slow transformation. A transformation into what I was meant to be. I devoured it until nothing was left but bone and a thin trail of guts trailing off the branch like ivy. My belly was full, heavy, but in a good way. My wings twitched at my sides, and my fire gland throbbed faintly in my throat like it was getting ready. I turned and looked at the tree beside me. Massive. Trunk wider than most houses I remembered from my past life. Leaves the size of my old torso. I crawled along the branch, claws clicking lightly, and perched at the edge. I looked down at my own body, comparing the length of my tail to the width of the branch, measuring my shadow as it stretched along the bark. I wasn't small anymore. Not like before. A few weeks ago, I was barely the size of a squirrel, weak, helpless, scraping bugs off leaves just to survive another day. Now, I squinted at my limbs, at the spread of my wings, the length of my tail and torso laid out across the curve of the tree. If I had to guess, 5 feet long. Not standing upright lengthwise. It was a massive improvement. I was more than triple the size I had been when I first hatched or woke up, or reincarnated, or whatever the hell happened to me. But even now, as I flared my wings and flexed my claws, I knew the truth. I was still small. Not just compared to the legends like Godzilla and Kong. Not even compared to the skull crawlers or the other apex creatures of this cursed island. Even the jungle deer were bigger than me. Even the boars. I was getting stronger, sure, but Skull Island didn't care. It wasn't going to slow down and wait for me to catch up. Everything here wanted to kill me. And until I could fight back with real fire, with real power, with dominance, I was still prey. But not for long. I spread my wings again, lifted off from the branch, and soared above the jungle canopy. The air was mine. The sky was mine. And one day soon, everything else would be too. Chapter 13, The Days Between. Time passed. Days blurred together like leaves in the wind. There were no big fights. No giant monsters crashing through the trees. No dramatic showdowns. Just the quiet grind of survival. And that was fine with me. I had come a long way. My body was stronger. My wings more reliable. My flame still a flicker, but no longer a joke. I could light up a bush if I needed to. Burn through soft bark. Even scare off smaller predators. Most days, I flew. Not far, not high, but farther than before. 10, maybe 15 minutes at a time without rest. I'd soar over the trees, letting the wind carry me across the dense canopy, watching the movement of other creatures far below. I learned to read the jungle. Which patches of trees hid fruit-bearing plants? Which rivers were home to dangerous things with sharp teeth? Which animals hunted by night, and which disappeared when the skull crawlers came? I stayed clear of the bad zones. I knew better now. I hunted when I could. Squirrels. Lizards. The occasional unlucky bird. I roasted some with fire, not because I had to but because it was satisfying. Efficient. And a little fun. My den, if you could even call it that, was tucked high in a tree, shielded by thick vines and long leaves. Safe, hidden, and just wide enough for me to curl up and rest. And that's what I did. Rest. Eat. Grow. Some nights, I'd just stare up through the breaks in the leaves at the sky. The stars were different here than the ones I remembered, if those memories were even real. They flickered strangely, almost like they were watching. Sometimes, I wondered if I was still dreaming. If this world was just some long, weird hallucination that started the moment I died. Fire. Popcorn. Screams. Godzilla on the screen. Then darkness. Then wings. Then this. But it didn't feel like a dream anymore. It felt real. And the longer I stayed alive, the more real it became. Even if I still didn't understand how I got here or what I was meant to do here, I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't dying anytime soon. I was too stubborn. Too hungry. Too determined. And every quiet day that passed, I grew just a little bit closer to becoming something monstrous. Something that this island would one day fear. Chapter 14, Predator Among Prey. The air was warm. The wind carried the thick scent of the jungle, damp leaves, muddy earth, and somewhere distant, blood. I flew just above the canopy, weaving between rising columns of heat and shafts of sunlight. My wings were steady, strong. I could stay airborne now for nearly 20 minutes without struggle. It was becoming second nature, this flying thing. Below me, the jungle shifted, rustled, then parted. A clearing. And in it, deer. A whole herd of them. Skull Island deer. Massive things, taller than I was, with gnarled antlers and tough hides. Their movements were sharp, alert, twitching at every bird cry or snapping twig. I kept my distance. Even now, a frontal attack was suicide. But then I saw her. A smaller one. A doe. Maybe younger than the rest. Quieter. She lingered at the edge of the herd, distracted, nibbling on some overgrown moss beneath a tree. Alone. Vulnerable. I circled once overhead, banking on the breeze. My fire gland buzzed in anticipation. Not for flame but for action. For the hunt. Then everything changed. The ground exploded. A skull crawler burst from the underbrush with a screech like splitting metal. Its pale, eel-like body whipped forward, maw gaping. The deer panicked, scattered in all directions. The crawler lunged, snapping its jaws around the neck of a buck. Blood sprayed, hooves kicked. And I moved. While the predator feasted, while the herd was chaos-eyed of. Wings folded tight. Body streamlined. The doe didn't even see me coming. I crashed into her from above, claws digging into her spine, wings flaring to slow the fall. She kicked, thrashed, but I bit down hard, ending it fast. Then I rose. The skull crawler hadn't noticed. It was too busy tearing apart its own kill. I beat my wings furiously, hauling the limp doe into the sky, over the trees, and back toward my home. The flight was heavy. My muscles strained. The doe's weight nearly pulled me from the air more than once, but I refused to let go. This was mine. By the time I reached my den, the blood had soaked into my scales. I dropped the carcass onto the wooden floor of my hidden perch and collapsed beside it, panting. Then I started eating. The meat was different than fish or lizard. Earthy. Warm. It filled me in a way nothing else had before. And as I tore into the flesh, muscles still burning from the flight, I realized something. This wasn't luck. This was strategy. I had waited, watched, used the skull crawler's chaos to my advantage. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was becoming a hunter. Chapter 15, Wings Against Wings. Morning came with a hazy light slipping through the leaves. The jungle pulsed with life, buzzing insects, distant screeches, rustling branches. I perched near the edge of my den, licking the last of the dried blood from my claws. The bones of the doe still lay scattered behind me. Picked clean. But I was already hungry again. Not because my belly was empty, but because my body demanded more. Every meal made me stronger, faster, and I could feel that change now. My limbs had filled out. My wings stretched farther. My flame, though still no roaring blaze, had a sharper heat when it sparked from my throat. So I hunted. Not in desperation. Not scavenging like I used to. I hunted like I belonged. I took to the skies, gliding low over the treetops. The wind was smooth today, favoring my wings, letting me coast without effort. Below, I scanned the canopy looking for movement, listening for sounds that didn't belong. Then I heard it. A rush of air. Wings. Not mine. I glanced up. 3 birds, gliding in lazy circles above the trees. Big ones. Not the tiny flittering bugs with feathers I used to ignore. These were jungle flyers, some the size of large dogs. Colorful, with long beaks and sharp talons. And meat. My stomach tightened in anticipation. I climbed higher, flapping hard, wings slicing the air as I gained altitude. I flew above them, letting the wind carry me into their blind spot. They didn't notice me. Not until I folded my wings and dove. The wind roared in my ears. My claws extended. My jaws opened. The first bird barely squawked before I crashed into it. We tumbled mid-air, feathers flying, its wings flailing as I sank my teeth into its neck. I snapped it fast, then flared my wings just in time to pull up before we both slammed into the trees. The others screamed and fled. Cowards! I clutched the dead bird in my claws and flew back toward my den, blood dripping from its broken body. The flight was easy now. My muscles didn't burn like they used to. I was used to this. I was built for this. Back at my perch, I feasted again. Bird meat was lighter, but rich. Juicy. The bones were thin and easy to crush between my teeth. I ate fast. Clean. Efficient. Then I stretched my wings and looked out over the jungle again. This was my routine now. Hunt in the morning. Eat. Fly. I no longer waited for others to leave scraps. I didn't cower in trees hoping to avoid danger. I was the danger now. Small still, sure. But growing. Every single day. And the sky? The sky was mine. Chapter 16, Chapter 16, Fire and Flight. The sky was calm that morning, too calm. No wind. No bird calls. Even the buzzing insects seemed quieter, like the jungle was holding its breath. But I was hungry. And hunger didn't care about uneasy silence. I flew low, wings slicing through the thick air, eyes scanning the forest for movement. Birds weren't in the sky today. Even the usual deer herds had vanished. Something was off, but I ignored the instinct. I shouldn't have. I spotted a lizard creeping along a sunlit log. Big enough for a light snack. I dove silently, claws extended. Crash! The earth erupted beneath the log. A skull crawler launched up from the ground like a nightmare, its pale body cutting through the jungle, dirt and roots flying in every direction. Its gaping mouth was inches from me before I even had time to think. I twisted mid-air, trying to bank away, but the thing's long tongue lashed out, slamming into my side and flinging me sideways. I hit the ground hard, skidding through the underbrush, branches snapping beneath me. Pain shot through my wing. Not broken. Just bruised. But enough to scare me. The skull crawler let out a bone-rattling screech and charged, its gaping maw wide enough to swallow me whole. I scrambled to my feet, hissed, and let it out. Fire. It wasn't a roar. Not yet. But it was a jet of bright orange sparks and heat enough to scorch the crawler's face. The beast reeled back, hissing, its eye blinking rapidly as smoke curled from its snout. It wasn't enough to kill it, but it gave me a second. I didn't waste it. I ran, wings beating furiously, every muscle screaming as I leapt into the air. The crawler chased after me, crashing through trees, howling with rage. But I was faster now. Stronger. And this time, I stayed in the sky. I rose above the treetops, flapping hard until the crawler was just a pale streak below, stomping and thrashing in frustration. I didn't stop until I was miles away. I landed high on a cliff edge, panting hard, smoke still curling from my throat. I stared down at the jungle below, eyes sharp. That was close. Too close. But I fought back. I survived. My fire had saved me. Not a spark, not a flicker, but a true blast. I curled up beneath a rock overhang, heart still racing, my scales still hot. One day I'll burn them down completely. One day I won't have to run. But for now, I lived. And that was enough. Chapter 17, Chapter 17, Fire Claims the Jungle. Dawn bled across the jungle in a misty gold hue. My wings caught the morning light as I soared above the trees, stronger than ever. Every beat of my wings came with ease now, every shift in the wind answered to my command. Today felt different. I was no longer looking for scraps. No more lizards or birds. I wanted real prey, something that would push me, feed me for days, and test what I had become. I found it near the far side of the river, where the trees grew sparse and wide. A jungle boar, huge, scarred, tusks chipped from fights I could only imagine. It grunted and rooted through the dirt, completely unaware I circled above. I dove with precision, my claws slicing through the air. The boar squealed, bucked, but my talons dug into its back. It thrashed, tried to shake me off, but I was stronger. I snapped at its neck, dodged its tusks, and finally I brought it down. I stood over the fresh kill, smoke rising faintly from my nostrils. Victory buzzed in my blood. Then I heard it. The hiss. The screech. The ground shook. The same skull crawler. Scarred now, the burn marks I gave it still raw and angry along its face. It remembered me. It wanted payback. I backed away from the boar, fire already building in my chest. The crawler burst from the tree line, jaws open wide, no hesitation. I fired. Not just a spark. Not a burst. A full blast. Flames roared from my throat, hotter than anything I'd released before. It engulfed the skull crawler's face, searing into its skin, pouring across the ground and into the dry underbrush. The crawler howled and thrashed, and I struck again, fire and claws, wings flared wide. Then I smelled it. Smoke. Not just from my fire. From the trees. The jungle was burning. Flames licked up the trunks, leapt from bush to branch. Smoke twisted into the sky. I stumbled back, wings flapping to stay ahead of the blaze. The skull crawler collapsed dead, charred, its body smoldering. But I wasn't alone. Boom. The sound hit me in the chest. Boom. Trees cracked and fell. The earth trembled. And then he appeared. Kong. He towered above the trees, fur matted with dew and dirt, eyes glowing with ancient fury. He saw the fire. The smoke. The mess. For a moment, I froze. Then he moved fast. He grabbed an enormous fallen log, slammed it into the flames, stamped out the fire with crushing blows. He broke open a chunk of earth, letting water pour from an underground spring, soaking the fire's edge. In minutes, it was over. Smoke still hung in the air. Ash drifted down like snow. Kong stood still, breathing heavy, towering like a god. And me? I stood atop the charred skull crawler corpse. Wings stretched wide, head held high. I didn't cower. I didn't flee. This kill was mine. I stared at him. He stared at me. A beat passed. He didn't growl. Didn't attack. Maybe he wasn't hungry. Maybe I was too small to be worth his time. Or maybe, just maybe, he saw what I was becoming. A predator. A survivor. A creature of fire and flight, no longer crawling in the shadows. Kong turned. Walked away. And I stayed. High on the kill. Alone, but not afraid. Chapter 18, Chapter 18, Taste of Power. The smoke still clung to the air like ghosts of fire past. Ash rained lightly over the jungle floor, soft and grey, coating the scorched clearing where the skull crawler's corpse smoldered. And I stood atop it, wings tucked, chest heaving, heart pounding from the clash of flame and fury. Kong was gone. The skull crawler was dead. And I was still alive. I leapt down from its back and approached the body. It was half burnt, the flesh charred in places, but it was still meat. Still mine. My kill. I dug in. The taste was powerful. Bitter with the scent of sulfur and blood, but laced with something else, something deep. Like I was consuming not just the body, but the very essence of a monster that had hunted this island long before I hatched. With every bite, I felt my blood heat up. My muscles tensed, bulging slightly. My flame gland throbbed not with pain, but with pressure. Something in me was changing. I welcomed it. But then a hiss. From the edge of the clearing, a low-bodied reptile crept forward. It was a jungle lizard, big as a wolf, dark green with jagged spines and teeth like needles. Drawn by the scent of blood. It looked at me, then at the carcass. It dared to approach. I froze, staring. It stepped closer. I growled low, smoke curling from my jaws. Still, it came. And that was enough. I pounced, wings flaring for speed, claws slashing. The lizard hissed, snapped its jaws at my throat, but I spun midair, whipped my tail, and pinned it down with both feet. Then I bit into its neck. Hard. It kicked, thrashed, but I didn't let go until it went still. I dropped the limp thing beside the skull crawler's half-eaten corpse. Then I ate both. I feasted like I hadn't in days. First the lizard, its meat was leaner, sharper, but easier to swallow. Then back to the crawler, dense, fatty, rich with power. I didn't stop until my belly swelled and my sides ached. And when I was finally done, I lay on my side beside the bones, breath heavy, wings twitching. I could feel it again. My bones creaked. My muscles pulsed. My scales itched as if stretching. And in my chest, my fire burned hotter. This wasn't just growth. This was evolution. I was no longer just surviving Skull Island. I was feeding on it. Becoming a part of its brutal rhythm. And soon I wouldn't just be another predator in the jungle. I'd be a force. A dragon. Chapter 19, Lord of the Pond. My wings felt heavy from the feast. My belly dragged a little as I glided low over the treetops, heading back to the place I now called home. A high, moss-covered cliff with a shallow cave tucked into the side, shaded by thick vines. Below it, the pond. My pond. It was quiet as I landed beside the water's edge. The surface shimmered, reflecting the cloudy sky, broken only by the occasional ripple of fish beneath. I leaned down to drink, still hot from my hunt. But then, something moved. Fast. Sharp pain bit into my neck, teeth long and needle-like. Something leapt from the water, latching onto me. I roared, thrashing backward, blood trickling down my scaled throat. The thing, some kind of aquatic predator, long and eel-like with small legs and a mouth full of daggers, clung to me, trying to drag me toward the water. I didn't hesitate. Flame burst from my throat. The fire hit the water like a storm. It didn't just stop at the surface. The heat sank deep, boiling the pond in seconds. Steam exploded into the air. Fish floated to the top, belly up, their scales peeling. The thing on my neck let go, shrieking as it burned, and I stomped it into the blackened mud. I stood there, panting, as the steam thickened around me like a fog. My pond was dead. Every fish, every insect, cooked. I looked around, chest still rising with rage. But slowly, a thought pushed its way through the fury. This is mine. I could fix it. Make it better. Not just a place to drink or swim. A place to grow food. To control. To own. So I took off again, wings slicing the thick air, soaring toward the smaller streams I'd flown past before. I found a shallow, clear pond tucked between rocks, brimming with tiny darting fish. Easy to catch. One by one, I snatched them from the water, gentle enough to keep them alive. I carried them, awkward in my claws and mouth, back to my own scorched pond. I dropped them in. Some panicked. Others floated still. But a few darted off, surviving. I went back. Again. And again. Until my pond, my kingdom of water, was alive again. Not with the threat of predators, but with prey. My prey. I sat by the edge as the day waned, watching the tiny fish settle into their new home. One day, they'd grow. Multiply. Fill the pond with life again. And when they were big enough, I'd eat them. Not out of desperation. Out of strategy. Out of control. This wasn't just survival anymore. This was territory. This was farming. This was mine. I was no longer just another creature in the wild. I was a dragon with a domain. Chapter 20, Chapter 20, The Echo in My Skull. I slept deep that night. The pond gurgled gently below my cave, steam still rising from the scorched rocks. My belly was full. My wings were sore from the hunt. The new fish I'd brought in swam quietly beneath the surface. Everything should have felt peaceful. But it didn't. I woke up with a ding in my head. Not a noise. Not a sound from the jungle. It was inside me. Like something tapping behind my eyes, a ripple in the silence of my thoughts. A pressure. A signal. I jerked awake, blinking rapidly, smoke puffing from my nostrils. What was that? I stood at the mouth of my cave, scanning the sky. The jungle was still half dark with mist and morning light. Then I felt it again. Not pain. Not fear. A presence. And she came through the trees. 1. Wings folded tight. Tail low. Eyes sharp as a blade. A dragon. Just like me. No, not like me. The same size. Same fire behind the gaze. Same muscle, same cautious step. I tensed. She did too. We stared at each other across the stone ledge. She didn't growl. Didn't bare her teeth. And neither did I. The feeling in my head, the strange hum, that echo, it was gone now. Faded the moment she arrived, like it had called her here. We circled each other slowly. I could see her scars. Faint. Faded. She wasn't new to this island. But she was alone. Like me. She came closer. Lowered her head near the pond. I didn't stop her. She drank, careful, watching me from the corner of her eye. Not a word. Not a thought spoken. Just understanding. 2 predators. 2 survivors. And now maybe 2 of a kind. I didn't know where she came from. Not yet. I didn't know why she was the same size as me, or why that ding in my skull brought her here. But I didn't chase her off. And she didn't leave. For now, we stayed near each other, a cautious closeness forming. When I curled up to sleep again, she was just outside the cave, curled under a tree. Close enough to hear my breath. Far enough to fly if I turned. But I wouldn't. For the first time since I'd been reborn on this brutal island. I wasn't alone. Chapter 21, Chapter 21, The Invitation. Morning crept over Skull Island in a hazy grey fog, dew clinging to every leaf and branch. I stood on the cliff's edge, watching the mist roll across the canopy, thinking about the stranger now sharing my skies. She hadn't left. Still perched beneath the tree where she slept, wings folded neatly, head resting on her claws. She was cautious, calm, but there was something in the way she watched me, a flicker of curiosity that matched my own. I stretched my wings and took a short glide down to the pond. The fish were already stirring, shadows darting below the surface. I snapped up too, crunching their soft bodies between my teeth as I looked up toward the cliff. She was watching. I stared back, then jerked my head toward the water. An invitation. She didn't move at first. I stood by the edge, letting her decide. I wasn't going to force her if this was going to work, it had to be built on something solid. Trust, maybe. Or at least mutual gain. She finally stood, shook out her wings, and glided down to meet me. The moment her claws hit the dirt beside the pond, I turned and nudged the water with my snout. These fish, my fish, weren't just a meal. They were a plan. A future. I watched as she crouched, looked into the water, and plucked one out in a smooth, swift motion. She crunched it without hesitation, looked up at me, and blinked slowly. Approval. I huffed gently, pleased. Then I led her up the stone path along the cliffside to my cave. The route was narrow, steep in places, but she kept up easily. When we reached the entrance, I paused. Inside was nothing special, just a hollowed space in the rock, dark and dry. But I'd made it mine. Leaves piled thick on one side, layered with moss and soft branches. Feathers too, from birds I'd hunted. I stepped inside and gave her a small look over my shoulder. Not a warning. Not a challenge. Just a quiet "this is where I live." She followed. Walked the edge of the cave, sniffed at the walls, looked at the bedding, then at me. I saw the way her eyes lingered on the leaf pile. She approved. She didn't try to take it from me. Didn't assert dominance or bare teeth. She simply walked over, circled once, and curled beside it, not on it. Beside it. Close, but respectful. That was enough. I lay down beside the bedding, smoke curling from my nostrils as I relaxed again, this time not alone. The air inside the cave felt warmer than usual, less empty. She didn't speak, of course. We had no words. But her silence spoke of understanding. Of survival. Of a strange bond growing in a place where everything else wanted us dead. This was still my cave. My pond. My plan. But now, I wasn't just guarding it for myself. I had someone to protect it with. Chapter 22, Chapter 22, Hunt of Two. The sun rose gold and red across the treetops, warm light spilling over Skull Island's endless jungle. I was already awake when the first rays hit the cave wall, pacing near the entrance with a full stretch in my wings and fire coiling low in my throat. She stirred behind me, blinking slow, her scales catching the light like dull embers. We didn't speak, not with words, but we didn't need to. I looked at her. She looked at me. I spread my wings. She mirrored me. And that was all it took. We took off into the sky, side by side. Her form was graceful in the air, faster in a dive, tighter in her turns. I was bulkier, heavier, but stronger in bursts. Together, we cut through the clouds like twin shadows gliding just above the trees. We were hunting. I led us north, to a part of the jungle I hadn't explored in a few days. Thicker trees. Fewer predators. Prey moved in herds here, smarter, faster, but still prey. And sure enough, we saw them. A group of Skull Island deer grazing near a broken waterfall, where mossy rocks and patches of sunlight made for a peaceful trap. They didn't see us yet. I slowed midair, hovering behind a cluster of trees. She did the same, eyes locked on the largest among them, a fully grown male, tall antlers, thick legs. The leader of the herd. She looked at me, waiting. I nodded. We dove together. She went high, wings arcing like a hawk. I shot low through the trees, claws extended, smoke trailing from my jaws. The deer scattered. But not fast enough. I came in first, swiping at the flanks, driving the herd into confusion. Then she struck from above, slamming down with all her weight onto the stag's back, claws digging deep. It buckled, tried to run, but I was already at its side, biting, ripping, ending it. It was done in seconds. We stood over the carcass, breathing heavy, blood steaming in the morning air. Then we ate. Side by side, no growls, no fight over meat. Just the quiet rhythm of two dragons feasting together. I hadn't realized how different it felt. Hunting had always been survival. A battle of blood and desperation. But this was something else. It felt like power. Like we were building something. Like we were stronger together. When the deer was down to bones and gristle, we sat back, wings drooped, bellies full. She looked at me. I looked at her. And without a word, we took off again, flying home side by side. The island still wanted to kill us. But now, we hunted not as lone survivors, but as a pack. 1. Chapter 23, Chapter 23, replenishing the pond. The flight home was slow and lazy, our bellies full and our wings heavy with meat and air. She flew slightly ahead, casting long shadows over the trees as the sun slid westward, and I followed close, my eyes locked not on the sky but on the idea of the pond. My pond. Our pond, now. We landed just as the light began to fade, our claws thudding softly into the dirt near the water's edge. I trotted forward, ears twitching, already sensing something off. The surface was too still. Too quiet. I crept closer and peered in. What I saw made my gut twist. Half a dozen fish floated dead near the rocks. Others darted frantically through the shallow water, panicked, confused. I spotted the culprit instantly: thin, long-bodied, cold-eyed. A snake. It was coiled on a rock, belly bloated from the feast it had stolen. A pond snake, one of the slick, water-hunting types. Small, but deadly to anything that relied on the water to live. 1. It hissed at me. Wrong move. I lunged. Claws first. The rock cracked under the weight of my strike. The snake didn't even have time to slither, it was reduced to paste in seconds. But the damage was done. I looked at her. She'd stepped beside me now, staring into the pond with that same silent understanding. The fish, they were disappearing. They hadn't bred yet. Too new. Too stressed. If we didn't add more soon the pond would be dead again. I growled softly and turned. Without hesitation, she followed me back into the air. We flew to the smaller streams again, faster this time. Not to hunt. Not to feast. But to rebuild. She hovered above while I dove into the water, plucking fish from shallow pools one by one. I dropped them into a thick leaf I'd curved into a crude carrying pouch, then carried them back in my claws and mouth. Trip after trip. Until the sun was gone and the stars crept through the clouds. By the time we returned to our pond again, we had brought back nearly 30 new fish. I dropped the last into the water and watched them scatter, wide-eyed and wild, but alive. She stood beside me, watching too. We'd saved it again. I rumbled deep in my chest and laid down at the pond's edge, tail curling around me, wings drooping. She lay beside me. No words. No looks. Just two dragons, watching over the future of their home. Because this was more than just water. It was ours. And we'd protect it together. Chapter 24, Chapter 24, Fire and Fang. The morning fog clung to our wings like silk as we soared above the trees. The jungle stretched out beneath us, endless and wild, each shadow a secret, each movement a potential meal or a threat. She flew just ahead of me, her tail trailing fire glow from the rising sun. We hadn't spoken, not with words, anyway, but we didn't need to. The way we moved in sync now, the way we turned together, scanned the ground together, it was clear. We were hunting. Together. But fate doesn't always hand out deer and fish. Not on Skull Island. We dipped low over a ridge, trees breaking into rocky hilltops below, when I smelled it. Burnt meat. Death. And sulfur. Then I saw it. Slithering below through crushed foliage and half-eaten bones. A skull crawler. I froze in the air for half a breath. They were dangerous. No doubt. Fast. Brutal. Smart. But they were also delicious. I remembered the last one. The flavor. The power I felt afterward. The strength in my muscles, the longer flight, the stronger fire. I looked at her. She had already stopped. Hovering. Watching me. Waiting. I growled low in my chest and tilted my wings. We dove. The skull crawler didn't see us until I was already upon it, roaring with a blast of smoke and flame. My fire struck its back, scales blackening and cracking under the heat. It screeched, tail lashing, claws raking at the air as it reared up. But then she hit it from the side, her fire catching it across the face, searing its eye shut. It swung toward her fast, vicious. I tackled it before it could reach her, biting down hard into its neck, claws digging into its side. It writhed, slammed me into the ground, but I didn't let go. She lunged in again, biting the back of its leg, dragging it down. We tore into it together. Wings flapping. Fire flaring. And when it finally stopped moving, we stood over the body, sides heaving, smoke curling around us. We didn't wait. We feasted. Warm meat. Tough hide. Rich with strength. Every bite made my chest burn hotter, my wings feel lighter. I could see the fire in her eyes, too. This wasn't just survival anymore. It was dominance. Claiming power from this island, one meal at a time. When we finished, blood dripping from our jaws, I looked at her, and for the first time, I saw not just a partner. I saw a rival in strength. An equal. And for the first time in a long time, I felt ready. Ready for the island. Ready for anything. We roared together, fire shooting into the sky. 2 dragons. Hunters. Killers. Becoming legends. Chapter 25, Chapter 25, The Bounty of Time. A full year had passed since the day she first appeared at the edge of my pond, and the island had shifted around us. The once silent, empty cave now felt alive with the hum of our existence. It was strange how quickly we had become a part of this island, just another force of nature in a world that had nearly killed me 1,000 times over. But now, things were different. The pond, once barely more than a small pool of water filled with fleeting fish and danger, had transformed. The fish we'd carefully relocated, those few we'd spared from the snake's insidious grasp, had flourished. They were now multiplying, gathering in the clear waters like a living tide. It was a sight to behold. I had never watched something grow so quickly. She and I checked the pond almost every day, hovering above it in the mornings, peering into the depths to see the bustling swarm below. The fish were thriving, their bodies growing larger, their movements stronger. They darted playfully through the water, their scales shimmering as they navigated the clear depths we'd so carefully managed for them. Every time I saw them, I felt a thrill. This was my creation. This was ours. They had multiplied. I could see it clearly now, a sustainable food source, living and breathing right beneath us. With the fish thriving, we were no longer just scavengers. We were farmers, hunters, and caretakers of the island's resources. But it wasn't just the pond that had grown. The island itself had become our home in a way I hadn't thought possible when I first opened my eyes in this body. We had claimed the island as ours. Deer and boar were now regular meals. We hunted in tandem, coordinated and efficient, circling our prey, using our fire and wings to drive the animals into ambushes. Our meals had gone from a few scraps, a catch of luck, to a steady stream of flesh and bone. We fed on the land, and the land, in turn, fed us. The boars, stubborn, muscular creatures with tusks that could pierce a dragon's hide, were among the most satisfying of our hunts. Their meat was tougher, richer. We tore into them with savage precision, splitting their hides open and digging deep to get to the heart of the feast. Deer were lighter, quicker, but no less satisfying. Every hunt brought a sense of pride. We were no longer surviving on scraps. We were in control. And every time we returned to the pond, I could see the difference in our reflections. The scales on my back had darkened, becoming stronger, thicker. My wings had stretched wider, more muscular, and I could fly longer, harder. She, too, had grown. She was sharper, faster. Her fire burned hotter now, and she could hold her ground with more confidence. I could sense it in the way she moved, like a true predator, not just a survivor. But it wasn't just our physical strength that had changed. Our connection, our bond it was stronger, more solid than I could have imagined. We shared our meals, our hunts, our rest, and every moment in between. Our nights were spent curled side by side, the crackling of fire the only sound in the cave. There were no more doubts. No more wondering if she'd leave. She was mine, and I was hers. And we were alive. The island no longer seemed so hostile. Even the skull crawlers and the massive predators that used to stalk the jungle felt distant, less menacing. We were at the top of the food chain now. Every challenge became just another opportunity to prove that we were more than the creatures who fought for survival. We were the rulers of this land. I would wake up every day beside her, watching the sun rise through the misty trees, knowing that together we could conquer whatever came next. Whether it was a creature of the island, or something even bigger, even more dangerous. Together, we would fight. And we would win. As the days passed, I looked at the pond again, the water shimmering beneath the shadows of the trees. The fish swam freely now, too numerous to count. I felt a pull in my chest, something that felt like ownership, but also like protection. I had built this. We had built this. And with every meal, every hunt, every flight through the air, I could feel the power growing in me. In us. I could feel it rising, like the island itself had taken root in my bones. We weren't just surviving anymore. We were thriving. Chapter 26, Chapter 26, The Next Generation. The morning sun rose slower than usual that day, casting a deep golden glow across the jungle. The air was thick with the scent of dew and fresh earth, a reminder that the island was always in motion, changing with the seasons. But that morning, something was different. I woke to the sound of a soft rustling at the edge of the pond. My eyes snapped open, and I immediately looked to where the sounds were coming from. At first, I thought it might be some kind of animal. Maybe another deer or a boar seeking a drink from the water. But then I saw them. Small figures. Scales glistening in the soft morning light, bodies no bigger than a large boar, but unmistakably dragons. I stood up from my bedding, wings unfurling slightly, and approached the water's edge. She was already by my side, her eyes wide with curiosity, watching the creatures closely. The small dragons, 4 of them, were cautiously stepping into the water. They moved with a strange mix of hesitation and instinct, as if unsure of how to navigate the shallow pond but determined to figure it out. Their scales were a deep, iridescent green, soft and glossy, still showing the remnants of their newborn skin. I felt a surge of pride. They're ours. They floundered for a moment, splashing through the water, before one of the cubs dipped its head beneath the surface. I watched, holding my breath, and saw the little creature dart forward, snapping its mouth closed with a splash. It had caught a fish. The others followed suit, diving and emerging with fish wriggling between their tiny claws, eager to show off their newfound skills. One of the cubs swam in circles, making playful gestures at the others, clearly trying to get them to join in. I couldn't help but smile, a deep rumble of contentment vibrating in my chest. They were growing already. I looked at her, standing beside me, and saw her smile, too subtle but unmistakable. The pride in her eyes matched mine. We had done this. We had created this. The 4 little dragons were learning from us, learning to hunt and to survive. It was strange, this feeling of watching them, seeing the reflections of our younger selves in their movements. They weren't perfect yet, still clumsy, still testing their wings, their fire, and their claws, but there was no mistaking it. They were ours. My heart swelled with a strange emotion that was both foreign and familiar. We had built something. We had created a family, a legacy. They were part of us. They were our future. I sat down by the water's edge, watching them carefully, my eyes following every movement they made. I felt her settle beside me, her wings folding against her back, her body radiating warmth. The cubs kept hunting, and soon enough, they began to bring their catch back to the shore, proud of their accomplishments. They had learned well, no hesitation, no fear. Just pure, instinctual drive. One of them stumbled over a rock, tumbling into the water with a small yelp, but was quickly caught by its sibling, who helped it back onto its feet. Their playful antics brought a soft chuckle from me, and I couldn't help but feel a deep sense of fulfillment. For the first time in my life, I realized that survival wasn't just about me. It wasn't just about the struggle for existence. It was about this moment, this family, this bond. As the day passed and the sun climbed higher in the sky, we watched them swim and play, our cubs, our legacy, growing stronger by the minute. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I knew that no matter what challenges came our way, we had something to protect. Something that would endure. Something that was more than just survival. It was the beginning of something greater. I turned to her, my eyes softening as I nuzzled her gently, the smallest of smiles tugging at my lips. Our family had begun. And it would only grow from here. Chapter 27, Chapter 27, The Sky Shakes. The wind was stronger that day. The kind of wind that cuts through your scales and sends a chill deep into your bones, no matter how warm the sun might be. We were flying high above the jungle, the familiar canopy of trees a sea of green beneath us. The cubs flitted around, gaining confidence in the air, their wings beating rhythmically as they learned to soar and dive. She stayed close beside me, her eyes scanning the horizon. We flew in silence, enjoying the peaceful rhythm of flight. It was a rare moment of calm in a world that had always been a struggle for survival. But then, the air changed. I heard at first a low, unnatural hum. It grew louder, echoing through the trees like a distant thunderstorm. The cubs froze mid-air, their wings twitching nervously as they too noticed something was off. I glanced at her, my heart rate picking up slightly, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. Then I saw it. A flash of metal in the sky. A helicopter. It cut through the clouds, flying low over the trees, its rotors whirling violently. I could hear the mechanical noise growing louder, a sharp whine as it moved closer. But it wasn't just the helicopter that grabbed my attention, it was what was chasing it. Kong. The great ape emerged from the tree lean below, his massive form towering above the jungle like a living mountain. He roared, a sound that shook the very earth beneath us, and I could feel the force of it in my chest. The helicopter swerved and dipped, trying desperately to evade him, but Kong's long arms shot out, swiping at the metal beast with terrifying speed. I watched, frozen, as the helicopter seemed to falter under Kong's wrath. It spun out of control, caught in the grip of the giant ape. I could see the humans inside, struggling to maintain control, but it was no use. Kong was relentless. He smashed the helicopter down with a single, crushing strike, the wreckage scattering in a violent explosion of metal and fire. It was chaos. The sound of Kong's roars filled the sky as the helicopter crumpled beneath his force, and I instinctively flared my wings, ready to flee. I could feel the adrenaline racing through my body. My mind screamed at me to get out of there, to run. Kong wasn't the kind of creature you could just face head-on, not yet. Without thinking, I angled my wings and shot toward the jungle, pulling my family in tow. She followed without question, the cubs quickly catching up to us as we banked into a sharp turn, weaving through the trees to distance ourselves from the chaos. We didn't stop until we were far from the crash site, hidden in the safety of the dense forest. The cubs, still confused and scared, landed near me, their eyes wide with uncertainty. She settled beside them, her gaze never leaving me. I didn't speak for a long while. I couldn't. My mind was too cluttered, too tangled with everything I had just seen. What had just happened? Kong. The humans. The helicopter. I had nearly forgotten. The truth of it all had been lost in the cycle of hunting, surviving, and raising a family. This place, the Monsterverse, was more than just a jungle filled with food. It was a world teeming with creatures, all of them dangerous in their own way. And Kong, the great ape, he was at the top of that food chain. I felt the weight of it settle over me. The sheer scale of everything I had barely begun to understand. Kong was the king of this island. But there were others: Godzilla, the Titans, creatures beyond my comprehension. I had barely scratched the surface of this world. The cubs stayed close to me, sensing my unease, but I couldn't explain it to them. Not yet. They were still so young, too innocent to understand what was coming. And I didn't know how to explain it myself. I turned to her. Her eyes were steady, unwavering, but there was a flicker of concern behind them. She knew something had shifted, something had broken in the air. But she said nothing. We couldn't stay there forever. Kong had made his presence known. The humans had made their presence known. It was only a matter of time before other creatures, other titans would come, drawn to the chaos, to the struggle for power. But we were no longer just survivors. We were something else now. We had built a family, a home. And the thought of that made me bristle. I would protect them no matter the cost. After a while, the tension began to fade. The cubs wandered off to play in the shade, their nervous energy spent. She and I lingered in the silence, the weight of everything hanging between us. I shook my head, a low growl rumbling in my throat. I need to clear my mind, I said, my voice rough. 1. She nodded. I'll go with you. I didn't answer. Instead, I stretched my wings and took off, climbing higher into the air, flying faster, pushing away the thoughts that clung to me. I needed to hunt. I needed to feel the rush of chasing down something, anything that didn't remind me of this. Kong. The humans. The monster-verse. I flew deeper into the jungle, dodging the trees, twisting through the thick canopy. My wings flapped with purpose, my mind a blur of thoughts I couldn't catch. The thrill of flight calmed me somewhat, but the questions lingered, bubbling just beneath the surface. What did it mean that Kong had attacked the helicopter? What was going to happen next? How long could we stay hidden? And then I saw it. A massive boar, fat and slow, rooting through the underbrush. It was alone, unaware of my presence, and in that moment, I didn't hesitate. I dove down with all the force I could muster, my claws extending as I sank them deep into the boar's back, pinning it to the ground. It struggled for a moment, but it was no match for me. A swift strike ended it, and I let out a long, satisfied breath. The tension in my body began to loosen. The hunt had distracted me, just for a while. I stood over the boar, my breathing heavy, my mind still buzzing with thoughts of Kong, the humans, the helicopter, and everything else. But the one thing that remained clear, above all else, was this. I had to protect my family. I had to protect the future I had built, no matter the dangers, no matter the cost. The island might be a place of titans and chaos, but we were here, and we were strong. I returned to her side, carrying the boar in my claws. The cubs were already waiting, their eyes bright with hunger and excitement. She nuzzled me, sensing the weight of my thoughts but not pressing for an answer. Not yet. We would face whatever came. Together. For now, though, I had a meal to share. And that, for the moment, was enough. Chapter 28, Chapter 28, A Feast and a Fight. The meal was already in front of us, the boar laid out on the ground, its rich, hearty scent filling the air. The cubs circled it eagerly, their small bodies trembling with excitement. She and I settled beside them, ready to enjoy the spoils of the hunt, when I felt the shift in the air. I froze, my senses on high alert. My eyes scanned the horizon, the trees, the sky. Something was coming. Something dangerous. The cubs grew still, sensing it too. She turned to me, her eyes narrowing, her muscles tensing. I heard it then, a faint rustling in the distance, followed by the unmistakable sound of claws scraping across the earth. It was too late to run. I heard the shrill, hissing screech that pierced the air like a blade. The skull crawlers. 5 of them. They erupted from the trees in a blur of movement, their long, sinewy bodies writhing toward us with terrifying speed. Their beady eyes locked on us with hunger, and I could almost smell their foul breath as they bared their sharp teeth. These weren't the ones we had fought before, but they were just as deadly hungry, desperate, and fast. Before I could react, the first one lunged at me. I swung my claws up, knocking it away with a blast of air, but another one came at my side, claws slashing through the air. I twisted, just in time to catch it with a burst of flame, the fire scorching its body. It shrieked in agony and staggered back, but it didn't die. She was already in motion, her fire lighting up the darkened air, as she aimed at one of the skull crawlers approaching the cubs. The flames danced around the creature's body, forcing it to retreat momentarily. But it didn't stop. The battle had begun. One of the skull crawlers darted past me, aiming directly for one of the cubs. I let out a roar, a rush of power surging through my body as I launched myself at the creature, slamming into it with the full force of my body. The skull crawler screeched in rage, thrashing wildly as I drove it to the ground, my claws raking through its scaly hide. My fire exploded from my mouth, and it screamed as the flames engulfed its body. It finally went still. I glanced over to see the other 3 skull crawlers still closing in. She had already engaged one, her sharp claws flashing as she struck it, her fire blazing with intensity. The other 2 were circling, trying to flank us, and I could see the intelligence in their movements. They were hunting us, trying to separate us, divide us. But they didn't understand that we had become more than just survivors. We had become a team. I gave a sharp whistle, signaling to her. We moved as one. She leaped forward, tearing into one skull crawler while I launched myself at the second. I felt the weight of its body as I collided with it, the force of the impact sending it crashing into the dirt. I opened my jaws wide, shooting fire into its exposed throat. The creature flailed for a moment before falling still, its body charred and lifeless. The remaining 3 skull crawlers hesitated for a moment. Their comrades were dead, and I could sense their hesitation. They were figuring out whether to fight or run. But we weren't finished. One of the skull crawlers launched itself toward me, but I was faster now. I leaped into the air, flapping my wings with such force that I sent the creature stumbling back, off balance. I followed up with a blast of fire, searing its face, and it screamed as it fell to the ground, its body twitching before it finally went still. Another one turned and tried to flee, but she was already on it. Her fire erupted again, pushing it back into the jungle as she chased it down. It never had a chance to escape. The last skull crawler, realizing its situation was hopeless, turned and fled as well, disappearing into the thick jungle underbrush. I stood there, panting heavily, surveying the battlefield. The air was thick with smoke from our flames, and the bodies of 3 skull crawlers lay scattered around us, their blood staining the ground. It was over. For now. I turned to the cubs, who had remained safely out of the fight, their wide eyes filled with awe and a touch of fear. She nuzzled one of them gently, her wings wrapping around the little one, offering comfort. I looked back at the battle site and then to the remains of the skull crawlers. We had won, but we were far from finished. "We'll eat well tonight," I said softly, my voice gruff, still catching my breath. The cubs didn't fully understand the danger, but they knew the victory meant something. They knew it meant more food for them, more strength for all of us. We set to work, tearing into the skull crawlers' bodies, devouring them with quick, practiced precision. Their meat was tough, sinewy, but it was meat. A good, hearty meal after a battle. I could see the cubs eating with a newfound hunger, their little bodies growing stronger with each bite. When we were finished, I looked at the remnants of our feast. There was still plenty left, more than we could consume in one sitting. A thought crossed my mind. Let's take the leftovers, I said to her, a plan forming in my mind. She tilted her head, intrigued. Feed the fish? She asked. I nodded. I carefully collected the remaining skull crawler meat, bringing it back to the pond. The cubs followed, curious about what I was doing. I scattered the meat into the water, the pieces sinking and floating as the fish eagerly swarmed, devouring it with relish. I smiled, watching the fish feast. They were growing too, just like us. Soon, they'd be large enough to sustain us for weeks. The cycle of life continued, and we were part of it. I turned back to her and the cubs, feeling a strange peace settle in my chest. The battle was over. The day had been hard, but we had emerged victorious. And now, we had a new meal to last us. More food, more strength, more power. It was just another day on Skull Island. And in the end, it felt like we were finally becoming the creatures we were meant to be. Chapter 29, Chapter 29, Fire Above Kings. It was just another flight. I'd left my family back at the den, the cubs wrestling over a half-eaten boar, my mate sunning herself near the mouth of our cave. I needed the air, the silence. My wings beat rhythmically against the sky, each flap echoing the strength I'd earned over time. I could fly for hours now without tiring, and I often did, watching, learning, remembering where I came from. I glided low across the jungle canopy, letting the wind whistle across my horns when something below made me stop. A roar. Loud. Brutal. Familiar. I hovered midair, wings still, eyes narrowing toward a clearing surrounded by shattered trees. There Kong. I hadn't seen him in a long time, not this close anyway. The last time I did, I was barely strong enough to fly. Now? I was nearly 30 feet from nose to tail. Lean muscle, thick scales, horns sharper than blades, and a fire that no longer sputtered, but roared. Kong was locked in battle. And not just with any beast. Raymarak. The alpha skull crawler. Larger than the rest. Smarter. Meaner. A true monster among monsters. I floated down silently, my shadow sliding across the trees. Kong was fighting like hell, every swing of his fists sending shockwaves through the air. But he was bleeding. Slashed across the chest, side torn open. Raymarak coiled around him, hissing, barbed tail slamming into Kong's leg. I could see it, Kong was losing. Then the sound of machines cut through the air. Helicopters. Humans. Weapons were locked, sights aimed. I knew what came next. They were about to intervene, throw their fire and metal at Raymarak to save their great ape ally. But they wouldn't need to. Because I was already diving. Fire boiled in my throat. For a split second, Raymarak looked up. Its soulless eyes met mine. Then the sky erupted. A blast of fire hotter than the sun slammed into Raymarak's back. It screamed in agony, twisting, writhing as I hit it with another searing wave. I circled above, relentless. Flame met flesh again and again until its screams became gurgles, and its scales split open in smoking lines of black and red. Kong pulled free of the beast's loosened grip, staggering back, panting. I didn't stop. With one final roar, I unleashed a concentrated blast directly at Raymarak's face, the force of it throwing the massive crawler backward. Silence. It didn't rise again. Smoke rose from its corpse, its massive form twitching one last time before going still. I hovered above the battlefield, letting the smoke and flames curl around my wings. The humans had gone quiet in their helicopters, stunned into stillness. Kong looked up at me, eyes wide, breathing hard. We stared at each other across the clearing, two apex predators sharing a moment no one else could understand. Then I nodded. A slow, deliberate dip of my head. Not submission. Not dominance. Respect. He nodded back. Then I descended. My claws clamped onto Raymorak's smoldering corpse, and with a beat of my massive wings, I lifted it off the ground. It was heavy, yes, but I was stronger now. A year of battle, blood, and survival had changed me. I wasn't just a baby dragon anymore. I was becoming something else. I carried Raymorak's charred body away, the stench of burned skull-crawler blood mixing with the air. Below, Kong watched, then turned back into the trees, limping but alive. Back at my den, the cubs came rushing out when they saw me return. My mate joined them, eyes widening at the sight of my prize. Raymorak, I growled low, dropping the body before them. They didn't know the name, but they could feel the power. Smell the victory. My mate pressed her head against mine, proud. The cubs circled the kill, their fire lighting up in excitement. As night fell, we feasted under the stars. I watched them eat, strong and wild, a family built in the fire of Skull Island. My flame lit the dark, casting flickering shadows against the trees. One day, the world would know us. But tonight, the island belonged to us. Chapter 30, A King's Gift. The sun had barely kissed the edges of the jungle canopy when the tremors started. Deep, slow, deliberate. Each one sent a faint ripple across the surface of our pond. I opened my eyes, not with fear, but awareness. Someone big was coming. I rose from the cave entrance where I'd been resting, stretching my wings and shaking off the night's cool stillness. My mate stirred beside me, blinking sleep from her golden eyes. The cubs, all four of them, peeked their heads out from under the leaves that made up their bedding, ears twitching. Another tremor. Then another. I stepped out into the clearing just as the trees began to part. And there he was. Kong. Towering, broad-shouldered, his fur catching rays of sunlight like molten bronze. He was calm, not aggressive, his movements slow, intentional. Behind him, small figures followed on foot and in a line, humans. Soldiers, scientists maybe, clad in jungle gear, holding strange blinking devices and rifles held low, not aimed. I didn't bare my teeth. I didn't roar. I didn't need to. Because I knew Kong. I'd seen what kind of creature he was. Not just strong but wise. Fair. Brutal when needed, sure, but never cruel. In a world of monsters, Kong was perhaps the kindest. And that's exactly why I wasn't afraid. We hadn't wronged him. We hadn't challenged him. In fact, I'd saved him just yesterday. So why would I run? I stood tall, no longer tiny, no longer weak. Almost 30 feet in length now, a broad-winged dragon with black and crimson scales that shimmered in the morning light. My horns curled back like spears, my claws could shatter stone, and my fire could turn a forest to ash. Still, I dipped my head slightly, not in submission, but greeting. He looked down at me. And though he didn't speak in words, his eyes told 1,000 stories. Recognition. Respect. Mutual understanding. My mate came to stand beside me, wings folded neatly, her posture regal. Our cubs bounded up behind us, staring wide-eyed at the titan. For a moment, Kong's stern face softened, and one of the humans behind him gasped when they saw what we had built. A cave. A pond. A self-sustaining home. Small fish darted under the water, some of them growing fat from the regular feeding. Vines crawled up the trees, and bones of past hunts were stacked neatly at the edge of the clearing. It wasn't just a lair. It was a haven. The humans murmured behind Kong, clearly stunned. They weren't just looking at beasts, they were seeing intelligence. Planning. Survival. A family. And then Kong did something I didn't expect. He moved aside, and behind him, dragged by large vines, were 3 skull-crawler corpses, freshly killed. He laid them down, one by one, in the clearing just outside our territory. A gift. A thank you. The humans stared in awe, unsure of what they were witnessing. Kong rumbled low, a deep, gravelly sound that filled the air but wasn't threatening. Then he stepped back, his eyes never leaving mine. I walked forward, past the cubs, past my mate, until I stood just a few feet from him. The difference in our size was still immense. He towered above me, but I didn't feel small. Not anymore. I could see the reflection of firelight in his eyes. He had acknowledged me as something more than just another beast. As a rival apex? Maybe not yet. But as a force? Absolutely. I nodded again. And so did he. Then, without a word, he turned and walked back into the jungle. The humans followed, still whispering, still looking back in disbelief. Kong didn't explain anything to them. He didn't need to. We dragged the skull-crawler corpses to the back of the clearing. One was already being picked apart by the cubs, tearing into the tough flesh, laughing in their way, learning what it meant to feed on victory. My mate joined them, ripping off large chunks, eyes gleaming with satisfaction. I stood watch for a moment, looking in the direction Kong had vanished. The jungle had gone quiet again. The air smelled like damp earth, ash, and the promise of a future I hadn't imagined a few weeks ago. Because now, I wasn't just surviving. I was growing. We were all growing. And we had made our mark on Skull Island. This land knew our fire. And now, so did the king. Monster, what if I was reborn as Drogon in Skull Island? Chapter 31, Chapter 31, A gesture returned. The jungle had settled back into its usual rhythm, the sounds of insects buzzing, distant birds cawing, and leaves whispering in the wind. The sun was rising higher, its warmth soaking into my scales as I stood beside the pond. I looked down into the water, watching the fish dart and scatter beneath the surface. They were growing in number now. My little ecosystem was thriving because I made it so. Because I chose to build something instead of just burn and destroy. But something sat in my chest, quiet, not heavy, not loud. Just there. Gratitude. It didn't make sense. Not really. I hadn't owed Kong anything. I wasn't weak. I'd slain Raymarak. But deep down, I knew. I wouldn't have had that chance if Kong hadn't already worn the monster down. His fight softened the beast. Distracted it. Slowed it. And when it was over, he didn't try to claim the kill or challenge me for it. He let me take it. He even thanked me. And today, I wanted to return that gesture. Not because I had to. Because I wanted to. I slipped into the pond. The water cooled my scales as I glided silently beneath the surface. My movements were fluid, practiced. I wasn't just a fire-breathing creature of destruction, I was more patient. Tactical. I'd become part of the island's balance. One by one, I began catching fish. Big ones. Fast ones. Clean strikes with my claws, powerful bursts with my tail. In less than an hour, I had gathered a modest pile, nowhere near enough for someone like Kong, but it was something. A symbol. My mate watched as I took to the sky with the fish clutched tightly in my claws. She didn't question it. She just gave a low hum, and one of the cubs tried to follow me until she held him back. This was something I had to do alone. It didn't take long to find Kong. He wasn't far, just west of the valley, near a river bend where the trees gave way to ancient stone ruins that had long been swallowed by moss and time. He was sitting. Resting. Wounded, but calm. The humans were gone, or maybe just out of sight, letting their king have peace. I landed a short distance from him, the fish thudding onto the soft earth between us. Kong's head turned slightly. His eyes landed on the offering. Just fish tiny, probably barely a snack for a creature his size. But he stared at them for a long time. And then, he nodded. Slow. Measured. Eyes meeting mine. Not amused. Not surprised. Just, acknowledging. I nodded back. There were no words, no grand ceremony. No roars. No beating chests or spreading wings. Just understanding. Two creatures shaped by survival. One had ruled this land for years. The other was rising. I didn't do it to gain favor or alliance. I didn't do it to curry protection or power. I did it because something deep inside me, the part that still remembered being human, maybe understood that gestures mattered. Even among monsters. I turned, leaving the fish where they lay, and took off into the sky once more. Below me, I saw Kong still watching until the trees swallowed his figure. The wind rushed past my horns, and for a moment, the weight in my chest eased. I wasn't just surviving Skull Island anymore. I was living in it. Part of its story. Part of its balance. And maybe, just maybe, I was becoming something even greater. Chapter 32, Chapter 32, The Year of Fire and Family. A year passed in the blink of an eye. But when I looked at my children, now larger, stronger, faster, I could feel every moment of it. The 4 older cubs had grown to nearly half my size, their wings spreading wider, their flames no longer sparks but streams. They hunted with precision, flew with grace, and roared with confidence. And though they sometimes squabbled among themselves, their bond was unbreakable. And we had 3 more now. 3 smaller ones, born just as wild and curious as their older siblings. Their scales were a little darker, their wings still stubby, and their fire, well, more like smoke with attitude. But they were fierce. Loud. Always chasing bugs, lizards, even each other's tails. And they adored their older siblings, even when they got tossed into the pond for it. Our family had grown. And Skull Island had accepted us. We were no longer predators hiding from bigger monsters, we were a presence. A force. Creatures that even the skull crawlers had learned to avoid when they heard our screeches echoing across the cliffs. But there was someone else who had become, more than just a passing figure in our lives. Kong. The king. The one who had once just been an apex to avoid, a rival to respect, had become something else entirely. It began slowly. I started bringing the older cubs near his territory, flying overhead while they watched him from the cliffs. He never minded. He would look up, grunt softly, and return to whatever he was doing, whether it was cracking boulders for roots or chasing away an encroaching threat. Then, one day, we landed. All of us. And he didn't move. Didn't roar. Didn't push us away. My cubs approached first. Hesitant, playful. They sniffed at his massive hands, tried to climb his fur, flapped awkward wings as they stumbled over his fingers like they were trees. Kong? He chuckled. It was the weirdest sound I'd ever heard from him, deep and rumbling, like an earthquake that decided to smile. That was the day everything changed. Now, 1 year later, it's a routine. We bring the cubs to Kong's side of the island. The older ones fly with me or my mate, sometimes diving through the canyon winds. The younger ones? We just leave them with Kong. And he watches them. Kong is our babysitter. It sounds insane even in my own mind, but it's real. He doesn't coddle them. He's not gentle like we are. He's just steady. If a cub gets too bold and climbs too high on his arm, he gently taps them back down. If one nips too hard or breathes fire too close, he gives them a stern look, and they listen. Sometimes he throws a rock into the river and watches them chase after the splash. Sometimes he lets them crawl into his lap while he sits under the shade, arms crossed, pretending he's not as invested as he really is. And sometimes, when he thinks no one's looking, he even smiles. My mate and I often perch nearby on a cliff, just watching. Sharing fresh meat while the wind carries the laughter of our children and the quiet grunts of a giant ape playing babysitter. It's peaceful. Surreal. Beautiful. This isn't just about survival anymore. It hasn't been for a long time. We've built something. A family. A home. A life where monsters don't just tear each other apart but share space. Share purpose. Kong didn't just let us exist. He let us belong. And in this strange, violent world where only the strongest thrive. Kindness? That's the rarest power of all. Chapter 33, Chapter 33, The Growing Pond. Time had moved again, and so had we. Our territory was thriving. The forest around our cave buzzed with life, the pond full of fish large enough to keep a family of dragons fed. The cubs, our 7 cubs, were growing at different paces, but all of them stronger than ever. The older 4 could now fly long distances, breathe real fire, and even hunt alone. The younger 3? They were still wild, clumsy, and loud, but their wings worked now, and that was all they cared about. It was peaceful. But we wanted more. Not more power. Not more territory. More space. The pond, once my secret refuge, was now a center of life. But it was too small. The fish needed room. The cubs needed room. And frankly, I needed a place to soak without someone cannonballing in every few minutes. So we dug. All of us. Day after day, clawing and scooping beside the pond's edge. Carving out a second basin, deeper and wider. The younger cubs rolled in the dirt, the older ones carried away rocks and branches. My mate shaped the earth with fire to harden the walls. But there was still one problem. No water. That's why today was different. We brought gifts. I flew through the trees with 2 deer dangling from my claws, their bodies limp but still fresh. Behind me, my mate glided with the older cubs, each of them carrying large, flapping fish pulled from the pond, our pond. The younger ones flew awkwardly in formation, squealing and chirping, unable to carry anything but desperate to feel involved. We landed near Kong's territory. The earth trembled faintly as he approached from behind the trees, towering and calm as always. The deer thudded to the ground before him. The fish flopped a little longer before going still. Kong raised an eyebrow at the feast laid before him, then turned his massive head toward me with a grunt of curiosity. I didn't roar. Didn't puff my chest. Instead, I walked a few steps forward and gestured with my head, "Follow me." Kong hesitated, then gave a slow, rumbling sigh and began to walk. It wasn't far. Just a short flight and a long walk through the thick jungle. Eventually, we reached the pond. Our home. He stopped. Looked around. The original pond shimmered in the sun, the fish darting just below the surface. The cubs ran to it instantly, splashing, laughing. But next to it, just a few feet to the side, was the new basin. Empty. Dry. Waiting. I looked at him. Then stepped toward the new pit, stomped once near the edge, then flapped my wings and hovered over the center of it. I roared, not loudly, but with intent. Then I flew over the main pond, pointed down, and hovered again. It didn't need words. He got it. He really got it. Kong grunted once, rolled his shoulders, then stepped forward. He crouched by the main pond and slowly dipped his enormous hands into the water. Scooped. The water splashed down his arms as he stood and stepped over to the new basin. With a slow motion, he tipped his hands and let the water pour into the dry space below. The cubs went wild. They screeched, flapped their wings, jumped from rock to rock. Even the little ones tried to catch droplets mid-air. My mate nuzzled my side, eyes warm. Again and again, Kong went back to the original pond. Scooped. Carried. Poured. His movements were careful, deliberate. He didn't flood it all at once, he helped. He respected the space. By the time the second basin had enough water to shimmer at the bottom, I stepped in and blasted a concentrated stream of fire at the wall between both ponds. The rock cracked. Boiled. Split. A few moments later, rush. The water surged in, connecting the two ponds. The cubs leapt in, sliding from one end to the other. Kong stood over us, arms crossed, watching the chaos with what I swore was amusement behind those heavy eyes. I turned to him, wings open in thanks. Not a roar. Not a growl. Just a nod. He nodded back. This island, for all its death and danger, had become something more. A kingdom of beasts. And we were building a future. Chapter 34, Chapter 34, The Great Pond. The sky was a waterfall. Rain hammered the trees, turned dirt to mud, and filled the air with the scent of wet earth and life. Thunder cracked above the canopy, but it wasn't a threat, it was music. And we were growing used to storms. By the time the downpour slowed to a drizzle, I stepped outside and saw the impossible. The two ponds, our careful project, our effort and sweat, had fully merged. The connecting trench was now a smooth river of water, the banks overflowing with rain. Fish swam freely between the two spaces, darting with new curiosity. The water level was higher, cleaner. Alive. It was beautiful. I waded into it, the cool rain still dripping down my scales, and submerged my body with a contented sigh. My wings stretched lazily across the surface. For once, I didn't want to fly. I wanted to float. I turned to the four older cubs and gave a light growl. A command, but a gentle one. Go hunt. You're ready. They didn't question. They launched into the sky, graceful, powerful, flames flickering from their jaws like streamers as they roared with youthful excitement. I sank deeper into the water. Peace. Rare, fleeting peace. But it didn't last. Something tugged at me. A spark. Not from the outside but inside. The pond, it was great. But it could be more. It could be bigger. A legacy not just for us but for everything that would come after. I stood up, water sliding off my wings, and marched out of the pond. Then I started digging. No one understood at first. My mate blinked at me, confused. She tilted her head, chirped questioningly. I didn't answer. Just dug deeper. Moved mud, earth, and rock. Claws sliced through soaked ground like it was pudding. I tore into the land with something more than instinct vision. Eventually, the younger cubs scampered over, squealing and excited by the mess. They didn't ask questions either. Just joined in. Wings flapping, claws slinging dirt, tails flailing with glee. Even my mate joined, still unsure but trusting me. Still, it wasn't enough. Not big enough. Not fast enough. We needed help. I lifted my head and gave a low, pulsing roar, long and slow, like a drumbeat through the trees. The forest rumbled in response. Minutes passed, then the earth shook. Trees parted. Birds scattered. Kong arrived. He looked at the muddy chaos, the half-dug trench, the splashes of water still sliding through the soft terrain. Then he looked at me. I didn't roar. Just walked toward the trench, dipped my claws in, and kept digging. He watched for only a second, then grinned. Kong rolled his shoulders, grunted, and slammed his massive fists into the earth. Boom! He carved out more dirt in one strike than I could in 100. The ground erupted. Wet earth flew like waves. Mud splashed across the trees. The rain from earlier had softened the soil so much that it gave way under Kong's strength like clay beneath a hammer. He didn't stop. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. By the time he was done, the land where our pond once ended now stretched farther than I could see from the ground. A true lake. So massive that even Kong, inside the basin, would take minutes to walk from one side to the other. The cubs shrieked with joy. The older ones returned from their hunt mid-flight, dropping their prey when they saw the transformation. My mate stood beside me, eyes wide, wings half open in awe. I stepped into the new hollow still dry for now, but not for long. I looked up at Kong, who was brushing mud from his fur, breathing heavily but satisfied. He looked at me. And I nodded. This wasn't just our pond anymore. It was ours. A dragon's vision. A titan's strength. A kingdom, not ruled but shared. And it had only just begun. Chapter 35, Chapter 35, The Dragon's Waters. The rain had stopped. The sky cleared, leaving mist curling over the ground like steam from the earth itself. The forest glistened, washed clean by the storm. And as the sun rose, it painted everything in gold. The soil was soft, the air fresh, and the world felt new. It was the perfect day to plant a future. I flew with my family, my mate, our 7 cubs through the dripping trees, past stone ridges and muddy banks, to the edge of our great new pond. The massive basin Kong had dug for us shimmered, even half filled, and already it felt like a sacred place. A dragon's lake. But we weren't done. This wasn't just water, it was ours, and I had plans for it. First, we got the plants. Lush, leafy, underwater greenery, scooped from smaller ponds and marshes scattered across Skull Island. We pulled them from the shallows with claws and teeth, flying them back in bundles to our new lake. Not for beauty but for life. Food for the fish. Shade for the water. Places for the small things to hide and grow. Each of us helped. The cubs dove and splashed, poking the plants deep into the mud at the bottom. My mate and I placed them more carefully, some at the edges, others in the center trenches, where they could root and flourish. In hours, the floor of the pond was alive with green. Next came the fish. Not just any fish. Only prey fish. Small ones. Fast ones. Ones that bred quickly, that would thrive in still water and wouldn't eat their own kind. We flew across the island for them, pond to pond, swamp to swamp. Caught them gently, carried them in our mouths, in leaf-woven slings the cubs made from vines and branches. We didn't take everything, just enough to seed a future. By evening, the new pond teemed with life. Dozens of fish darted through the plants, flashing silver in the shallows. They were already swimming in groups, adapting, exploring. And there were no predators. Only peace. Only growth. The cubs stared at the water, entranced, watching their prey swim lazily through the reeds. I could see the thought in their eyes, when they're bigger, we'll eat well. But it wasn't just about that. It was balance. Still, I wasn't done. There were 3 ponds now. The original one, small, secret, carved in those desperate days when I was still half-starved and barely more than a spark of a dragon. That was my pond. A reminder. A shrine to survival. Too small for many, but special in a way none of the others were. Then there was the second, fresh and clean. Dug by my claws, my mate's fire, my children's joy. A place for drinking, for soaking, for sleeping in peace beneath the stars. It had no fish, no mud, just clear water and quiet. And now the third, our lake. Massive. Rich. Alive. A true hunting ground. A future not just for us but for many. Maybe even other dragons, if they come. I started digging again. This time, not deep but long. Tunnels. Trenches. Narrow cuts in the earth connecting all 3 ponds. The original, the clean one, and the lake. A system. A network. A territory. The younger cubs helped by piling mud and rocks along the edges to shape the flow. My mate scorched the soil, hardening it, sealing it. The older cubs flew ahead, mapping where to dig, guiding the flow with flame and shadow. When the final trench connected, and the water began to flow between all three, I stood at the center and roared. A deep, proud, living roar. The clean water flowed gently toward the lake, while the lake's fish avoided the passage to the clean pond, kept at bay by clever stone placements and hidden currents. It worked. All of it worked. The fish in the lake were already breeding. Plants swayed with life. The water was clearer every hour. It had only taken a day, and yet, it felt like the beginning of an era. Kong passed nearby once during the work, watching in silence as we shaped the land. He didn't interfere. Just grunted once, then turned and disappeared into the trees. I think he approved. This wasn't just a place to live anymore. It was a domain. A legacy. A dragon's gift to the future. Chapter 36, Chapter 36, Waters of Fire and Rain. The next day, the rain returned. Soft at first, like the island was whispering. Then stronger, like a song rising in the trees, until the skies once again poured everything they had onto the land below. But this time, we were ready. We had dug. We had shaped. We had built something that could take the storm and welcome it. I stood at the edge of our great lake, wings half open, the rain soaking into my scales. All around me, the world blurred under the falling sky. The air was cool, fresh. The scent of wet stone and green leaves filled my nostrils. And the water rose. It didn't flood. It filled. Just as it should. The trenches between our three ponds rippled as the rainwater surged through, feeding each one in turn. The smallest pond was quiet and still, like it respected the new order. The drinking pond stayed clean, only touched by the rainwater filtered through stones and roots. And the lake, our great hunting ground, it thrived. Not muddy. Not murky. The rain didn't bring dirt this time. Because we had burned the edges. Days ago, my mate and I scorched the banks, turning the soft soil to hardened clay and blackened rock. Fire turned the mud to something strong. And now, when the rain came again, it didn't break the shape of the lake, it preserved it. Held it. Kept the water clean and the bottom clear. Some of the fish, those strange silver bottom feeders we brought from a highland spring, ate whatever muck the rain stirred loose, cleaning as they fed. The balance was working. The cubs splashed at the shore, chasing each other in the shallow trenches, wings flapping, tails whipping water. My mate stood nearby, calm and content, her eyes always on them even when they thought she wasn't looking. I stepped into the lake. Then dove. The water was cool, not cold, and smooth as silk. Visibility stretched far. I could see every shadow, every fish, every ripple of plant life swaying beneath the surface. Hundreds of fish now. Some small, darting in tight clouds. Some larger, their silvery backs catching glints of light through the rain. I swam deeper, gliding past clusters of plant-covered rocks, twisting between drifting strands of leafy green that danced with the current. Fish scattered as I passed, instinct telling them to flee even when I wasn't hunting. I didn't need to eat right now. This was just for me. To feel what we had made. I reached the deepest part, curled my tail, and launched upward in a spiral. Water spun around me. I broke the surface with a crack and a roar, sending a fountain of droplets into the air. The cubs roared back from the shore, mimicking me, proud and loud. Even the youngest one tried, though his came out more like a squeak. I paddled back to the edge and laid my head on the smooth, wet stone. My wings floated beside me. My tail drifted like a lazy serpent behind me. I didn't need to speak. Didn't need to think. This lake, this moment, it was a promise. Of food. Of shelter. of peace. But more than that, it was ours. I closed my eyes, surrounded by life and water and rain, and let the silence take me. Tomorrow, we would hunt. Tomorrow, we would defend it all again. But today, we simply lived. Chapter 37, Chapter 37, Hearth of Clay and Flame. 5 years had passed. The forest had grown thicker. The skies were more familiar. The scent of my home now carried across the wind like a signature rich with smoke, damp earth, and dragon. Much had changed. Our family had grown again. 4 more cubs had hatched, each one loud and wild, full of fire and hunger and curiosity. That made 11 in total now. 11 dragons soaring through the skies, fishing in the ponds, hunting through the brush, fighting over roasted deer bones, and wrestling in the sun-warmed mud. Our old cave, once a sanctuary, was now a crowded den of wings and tails and noise. The younger ones still curled up beside us at night, snoring softly into leaves and moss. But the older cubs, they needed space. Freedom. A place of their own. So we began building. Not just digging. Building. We found a flat stretch of land a little ways above the great hunting pond, close enough to the main den, far enough to feel like their own world. A small cliff overhang shielded it from rain. Trees lined its edge, and it overlooked the water like a throne carved from nature. We started with mud. Thick, heavy, island mud. Dug from the deepest parts of the forest and carried clawful by clawful to the new site. We shaped it into walls. Pressed it into form. Layer by layer, we built with our claws and tails and even our teeth. Then came the fire. I stood before the walls and unleashed a steady breath of flame, not wild, not destructive, but focused and hot. My mate did the same from the other side, while the cubs stood in awe. The mud hardened under the fire, the surface turning to something like stone, blackened and warm. We repeated this process again and again. A foundation. Walls. Openings shaped like windows, and a wide mouth that served as the entrance. We even carved small ledges inside where a dragon could curl up and sleep. It wasn't just shelter. It was a home. Their home. The older cubs helped, each with their own ideas. Some wanted it taller, others wider. One insisted on a tunnel leading to a high lookout spot, and another began shaping a small fire pit from stone in the middle of the floor for warm nights. They earned this place. 5 years ago, they were tiny, helpless sparks crawling on unsteady claws. Now, they hunted their own prey. Caught deer. Fought off scavengers. Flew far and fast. Some of them were almost the size I had been when I first met Kong. And speaking of Kong, he passed by once, during the construction. He watched for a moment in silence, then nodded once before moving on. He didn't speak, didn't roar. But he saw. He knew what this meant. This wasn't just survival anymore. This was a future. The younger cubs ran in and out of the new structure, shrieking and laughing as they slid on wet stone and leapt off low ledges. My mate shook her head at their chaos but smiled as she curled around the smallest one, who had fallen asleep with a fish still hanging from his mouth. I stood on the roof, if it could be called that, watching the trees sway and listening to the wind. This home would last. Maybe not forever, but long enough. Long enough for them to grow, to live, to pass it down or build their own. We were no longer just dragons on an island. We were something else now. Founders. And this place, mud-born and fire-forged, was our legacy. Chapter 38, Chapter 38, Nesting Grounds. The day was warm, the kind of Skull Island warmth that clung to your wings and buzzed through the leaves like a low hum. A breeze stirred the trees above, making the canopy sway and creak as I looked up, eyeing each one with purpose. It was time to start building again. 3 more of our cubs, almost full-grown now, would be moving out next year. They were ready. You could see it in their wings, in the way they flew farther each day, hunted their own prey, and returned with pride in their roars. One of them had even started digging their own little spot in the mud a few weeks ago, not realizing I'd already chosen where their house would go. I chuckled under my breath and turned my focus to the trees. We had picked a good spot just east of the last house, near a slope that led to the clean water pond. The land was soft but solid. Roots ran deep here, and the trees grew tall and thick. Good trees. Old trees. But they had to go. Not all of them, just the ones in the way. The ones that would tangle roots into the walls or block too much sun from drying the mud. I lifted my claws and slashed through the first trunk in a clean, deep cut. Sap bled out like golden tears, and the tree groaned as it leaned. I stepped back and unleashed a small controlled flame at the base, not to burn it down, but to weaken the inner bark. The heat cracked it open, and after a moment, the whole thing toppled with a thud that shook the ground. One tree down. Dozens to go. By the time the sun passed overhead, I had cleared 6. My claws were muddy, my tail was covered in leaves, and I was chewing on a stick out of boredom more than hunger. Then my mate joined me. She didn't say anything, just looked around, nodded once, and joined in. Her fire burned hotter than mine, perfect for softening the thicker roots. The younger cubs came after, laughing and tumbling into the brush, pretending to help as they bit at branches and dragged sticks around like trophies. One of the older cubs, soon to move into his own house, flew overhead and landed nearby. He tilted his head at the clearing, then looked at me. "For my siblings?" he asked. I nodded. "It's their turn." He said nothing for a moment, then smiled. "It's a good spot." He flew off again, but not before helping me drag one of the trees to the side where we'd start carving wood for frames and supports. That evening, I stood at the edge of the clearing, looking over the space. I could already see it in my mind. 3 more houses. Each one shaped to the cubs who'd live in them, one tall and narrow for the climber, one wide and grounded for the quiet one, and one dug slightly into the hill for the one who always wanted to sleep in the earth. We weren't just making homes anymore. We were building a village. The dragon village of Skull Island. Our legacy was spreading, claw by claw, flame by flame. And I'd burn 100 more trees if I had to, for them to have something of their own. Chapter 39, Chapter 39, A Titan's Touch. It was just after sunrise, the sky painted in soft gold and pale blues. The forest was quieter than usual, the birds only beginning to stir when the heavy, rhythmic thuds started in the distance. We all felt them, my mate, our cubs, even the youngest ones who were still half asleep in their moss beds. The ground trembled with each step. Kong! I stood up from where I was inspecting the half-cleared building site, wings stretching in the morning air. A few seconds later, the trees parted like curtains, and there he was. Towering, powerful, and peaceful. The big guardian of Skull Island stood on the edge of our clearing, eyes scanning the growing cluster of dragon-made homes and half-built foundations. His gaze rested on me for a moment, then flicked to the rest of my family. We didn't flinch. We hadn't for years. Kong wasn't a threat. He was an ally. More than that, a friend. I stepped forward and nodded. He nodded back. Without a word, I flared my wings, then signaled to my family. It was a hunting day, and today, we'd do something different. Something special. All of us took to the sky, even the young ones who could fly. We scouted the forests, rivers, and far fields. We caught everything we could: 2 deer, 3 boar, a wild cow that had wandered from its herd. My mate and 2 cubs returned from another pond with a mouthful of flopping fish. One of the older dragons even brought back a giant lizard, snapping its tail angrily until we roasted it on the spot. We laid out the feast in the center of the camp. Kong watched it all unfold. Then, to our surprise, he joined in. Not just to eat, but to help. He knelt beside one of the newly cleared home sites, giant fingers gently patting down the muddy wall I had shaped the day before. When it started to sag inward, he used a flat rock like a spatula and pressed the shape firm. One of the cubs shrieked with laughter and brought him a stick which he used like a sculpting tool, carving out a small groove near the roof for rain to run off. We worked together, Titan and Dragon. Not many could say that. By the time the sun was high above, the houses had taken real form, walls thick and solid, supported by hardened roots and fire-baked mud. Openings faced the sun, just as we'd planned. Kong even added a small stone fire pit outside one of the homes and placed a few bones nearby, perhaps a gift or decoration, I couldn't tell. Then we ate. We sat beneath the trees. Kong leaned against a cliff wall, chewing slowly on the boar we had offered him. My cubs darted between legs and wings, snapping at scraps and flying in dizzy circles. The older ones had their own small fire pits now, roasting fish and meat the way they liked. My mate nudged me gently and looked out at the scene. 11 cubs. 3 more homes nearly done. A full belly. A warm fire. A Titan ally. And a legacy that was growing. This wasn't just survival anymore. This was community. And it felt right. Chapter 40, Legacy in the Water. Another year passed, and with it, the rhythm of life continued steady, strong, and full of fire. This time, we welcomed 2 more cubs into our ever-growing family. Small, squirming, curious things with bright eyes and wings that flapped wildly even before they could stand. The older siblings were immediately smitten. The youngest of the previous litter cuddled them constantly, bringing soft moss and feeding them scraps of already chewed meat. Our den felt full. Full of warmth, full of noise, full of life. We built a small nursery cave just for them close to our main home, but quiet and surrounded by soft leaves and smooth stone. My mate rarely left their side during those first weeks, and neither did I, except to hunt or watch over the ponds. And those ponds, they were thriving. The first pond, the one we'd dug by claw and fire, was clear and alive. The fish had bred rapidly over the last few years, and now schools of glimmering silver darted through the reeds. The water was so full, we had to dig overflow channels to guide excess rain out into the forest rather than flood the dens. The second pond, our clean drinking water, remained pristine. With no predators and carefully kept boundaries, we had turned it into a sacred spot. No blood spilled there. Only peace. The cubs drank from it, bathed there, even played among the lilies and stones. The third pond, our giant pond. That one had become more than just a hunting ground. It had become a gathering place. Not just for us, but for the others. Smaller dragons, young rogues who had followed our scent trails, who had seen us from the sky and cautiously approached. They kept their distance at first, but when they saw our way of life, our fire, our homes, our fish, they wanted to stay. And we let them. But they had to earn it. They helped dig channels, expand the hunting ground, reinforce homes, and in return, they were welcome. The rules were simple: no fighting within the ponds, respect the cubs, and always share when the hunt was good. By now, we had dozens of dragons, young, wild, but slowly learning what we built. Not just a family, but a clan. And just when I thought the cycle might pause for a bit, 3 more cubs hatched. Tiny, wingless at first, with stubby tails and big, curious eyes. I could hardly believe it, 6 new lives in just 2 years. My mate and I were proud. We were also exhausted. But we didn't stop. We couldn't. They were our future. Our older cubs had become true hunters. They flew in tight formation, led food-gathering flights, and even started teaching the younglings how to use their fire without burning down half the island. One of them had even claimed the cliffside caves overlooking the big pond. Built their own home up there, reinforced it with wood and stone. I helped them shape it, but they did most of the work. They were ready to lead one day. And me? I found peace in the quiet moments, swimming beneath the surface of the pond while the fish brushed against my scales, laying beside my mate as the cubs slept nearby, watching Kong lumber by in the distance, giving a nod when our eyes met, an unspoken bond of ancient power and shared purpose. The skies above us were ours. The land beneath us, our roots. And the water that fed us, our legacy. The clan was growing. The world was changing. And I was no longer just some soul reborn in the wrong universe. I was a dragon. A father. A builder of something greater than myself. And this was only the beginning. Chapter 41, Chapter 41, The Flame Passes On. It was early morning when I saw them, small, wobbly figures by the edge of the big pond, wings too small to fly, tails twitching in excitement as they chased after fish in the shallows. At first, I thought they were some of my own cubs. But something was off. I counted again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All mine were still in the den, curled up in the warm embrace of their mother and siblings, dozing peacefully after a late night of hunting lessons. So who were these tiny dragons by the pond? I narrowed my eyes, stepping closer, trying to catch their scent. It was familiar, and not. The fish darted around their feet, the young dragons squeaked and slipped in the water, falling over one another. It wasn't until I heard a familiar wing beat behind me that I understood. I turned and saw him. My eldest son. His wingspan now nearly equal to mine. Muscular, proud, his scales a shade darker than they'd been the year before. He landed beside the pond, watching the little ones with a quiet intensity I knew too well. He wasn't just watching them, he was guarding them. I blinked. He met my eyes. There was a pause, a heartbeat, then he gave me a slow, silent nod. That's when it hit me. He's started a family. My chest swelled with something deep, something ancient. Not just pride. Not just love. Continuance. He was the first. The first of my children to take the fire I'd built and pass it on. To build his own circle of life. His own family. His own reason to protect. I walked toward him, slow and steady. The little ones stopped playing and stared at me, wide-eyed. One of them even bared tiny fangs and tried to growl, a sound that came out more like a sneeze. I couldn't help but huff a laugh through my nostrils. I sat beside my son, looking over the pond that we once built together, back when he was just a hatchling sitting on my back, too small to even fly. You did well, I said, my voice deep, low, only meant for him. He didn't say anything for a moment. Then, they're strong. Not just in body, they listen. They learn. Like their father, I replied. He dipped his head once, quietly. I looked around the pond, at the older cubs flying overhead, the younger ones splashing, the few dragons from other lines who had settled nearby with us. All living in this community we had carved out of a wild, cruel world. I remembered the beginning. That first drink of water.